Great. Good morning. Today is Thursday, September 19th, 2024, and welcome to today's regular meeting of the California Fair Political Practices Commission. Ms. Linker, will you please take roll?
Commissioner Baker?
Here.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Here.
Chair Silver?
Here. Well, before we touch on item number one, I just wanted to go ahead and take this opportunity to thank everybody who made our 50th anniversary event a great success. If you weren't able to join us, the event was last week. It celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Political Reform Act as well as the FPPC. It included 4 different panels on the past, present, and future of the Political Reform Act and the FPPC. And it also included a message from the governor talking about the fact that the FPPC is a leader in transparency, accountability, and innovation in the ethics space. And for me, someone who's worked at the FPPC, someone who's now chair of the FPPC, it was really a moving tribute. So I wanted to share it with everybody who didn't get to see it at the event right now. So staff is going to cue that up.
California, in so many ways, prides itself on being on the leading and cutting edge. And in the area of ethics, I'm very proud to say.
And it looks like we're having technical issues, but the good news is the video is available on our website with audio. And the gist of it is, like I mentioned, that the FPPC is a leader in transparency, accountability, and innovation. And in particular, Governor Newsom notes that the FPPC is often left thankless for the job that they do here, keeping public officials accountable, everybody that we regulate accountable. So he just wanted to step out and highlight our agency for the excellent work that it does. So with that, I also want to thank, the governor for preparing that message, the governor's office for preparing that as well. We also did an interview with former Governor Brown. I wanted to thank him and his staff for setting that up. And of course, all the panelists who participated in the event and our staff. Who spent hours and hours putting this all together. I'm going to open it up to the other commissioners. I don't know if they had any comments related to the event that they wanted to share.
Thank you,
Baker.
Mr. Chair. I thought it was an excellent program. A lot of time went into that. The panelists had such a great perspective on history. Hearing from Governor Brown was also a delight. And so thank you for taking the trip up there to do that. I don't know if that interview is also available on the website because it's so interesting, his perspective. But just want to say thank you as well for all the work that went into that. More good things to come.
Definitely. And I believe we have plans to share some of that interview on the website. So stay tuned. Next, we have item number 1, and that's going to be public comment for items not on today's agenda. Do we have any public comment for items not on today's agenda? Looks like we have someone in the room. Come on up. Good morning.
Good morning. I was here a couple of months ago speaking on an issue that I had.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. Do you mind identifying yourself and the organization that you're with?
I'm not with an organization. I publish an online newspaper. My name is Edmund Fitzgerald, if you'd like that name. I was here to talk about advertising that the city has done and did in the past, and we hadn't. It'd been like 2 years, and nothing had been done on it. The case was finally looked at and dismissed as being close to crossing the line of advertising using public funds. And as I told your group the last time I was here, I said, what is our purpose? Why are we here? It's to prevent stuff like this. Well, because of the decision of your legal counsel, the city now, this last Tuesday, has decided to spend $70,000 to do the exact same thing because we have another sales tax measure on our ballot coming up. I checked with the city attorney. It's going to be issued during the political season, as soon as those mail-in ballots go out. Now, you've given them a loophole by saying that they can do this if it's educational material. Well, it's educational material to convince you to vote for the issue, whether they say it or not. I think that this group needs to re-examine the criteria for this and stop it, because this is using public funds for that specific purpose. No matter how it's disguised, it's still being done. And I will probably be back. I'll probably file another complaint, a formal complaint. At this point, I figure like we can talk about it because it's not something before your group, and I was admonished about that before. Also, your staff, thankfully, Ms. West, gave me a case, Vargas, I believe it was, pertaining to this matter. And I would just remind legal counsel that the Supreme Court made the Dred Scott decision, a horrible decision, and many other decisions that were wrong, blatantly wrong. And we know that now in a historical perspective. And I'm looking at this being the same thing. If we really want to stop governments from using public funds to advertise, to promote a ballot issue, you need to close the loophole. And that's all I have. I just wanted to give you my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. And I just want to reiterate for you so you know our position on this, or at least I can speak for myself. Prosecuting violations of the misuse of state resources for a campaign purpose within the laws that we have jurisdiction over, which relate to reporting, registering as a committee, is a priority for these agencies. So if you see any potential violations, we encourage you to file a complaint with our enforcement division. I'd also note that we have robust resources on our website. I'd say probably out of all the areas of law we cover, this is one area that we have the most resources to assist localities, the state in complying with these rules, because they are complex and difficult to apply in certain circumstances. With that said, I can't comment on this specific item, but I'd encourage you to go ahead and file a complaint so we can make sure that if there is a violation that it's addressed. Any other comment from commissioners? Commissioner Baker?
Thank you. No, I appreciate taking the time to be here in person and to be vigilant. The use of public resources for political purposes is one of the top priorities for this commission the time that I've been on it. And for as long as I'm on it, I'm sure my colleagues, it will continue to be. One thing that we can do our homework on is what those rules are, which ones are because it's in statute, and which ones are because it's regulation. Because I know this isn't the first time I've asked that question. And some things are in statute and require the legislature to act. And some things we can do, the most we can do within our regulatory authority. That may be a homework assignment that we will have, but I appreciate the public comment.
Excellent point, Commissioner Baker. Any other comments from commissioners? Any other public comment for items not on today's agenda? Sounds like we do have one call-in. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, this is Steve Petzold calling in. Had comment today that I am noticing.
Give him a few more seconds.
Mr. Petzold, we can see you speaking, but nothing is coming through the room. Can you please hang up and call through again?
Okay. Okay, well, we can give it a few more seconds, and if it doesn't work, we'll move on, and then we can come back to public comment for items not on today's agenda.
Mr. Chair, if I can inquire.
Of course.
If our sound doesn't get back before our meeting adjourns, is there a way they can type it is there a written public comment that they're able to type? Okay, just want to make sure that's reminded to whoever's trying to give public comment if our sound isn't working. Sorry to put you through that additional hoop. I'm sure our team is working on it. Thank you.
That's a good point. Well, why don't we move on to first, any other public comment?
Yes.
Okay, well, why don't we move on to item number 2, and then we'll circle back to item number 1
Yes.
once the audio is fixed. Okay, perfect. Okay, we'll move on to item number 2, and that's Cal Access Replacement System. CARS, we have several representatives from our sister agency, the Secretary of State's office here, to present, and they'll be introducing themselves. Thank you so much for coming over and talking to us about this important project.
Can you hear me okay? Oh, all righty. Well, good morning, Chair Silver and Commissioners. Thank you for letting us join your meeting today. I'm Margie Heider. I'm the Division Chief of the Political Reform Division at the Secretary of State's office. And with me today, I am joined by Denise Tower to my right. She is the project director for our prime vendor. And we also have John Heinlein, who is the assistant project director for the Cal Access Replacement System project. So today we are here to give you an update on some of the activities that have been happening lately with the Cal Access project known as CARS. So we all know that this project has been in the works for a while, but what I would like to do is just take a minute to briefly give you a little bit of the history of the project and what happened in the past versus where we are today without going into a lot of detail about the past. The previous iteration of the CARS project was started during a previous administration. So I say that just to make sure that you are aware that Secretary of State Weber, when she came into the office of Secretary of State, the Cal Access project was already underway. When she came into the office, there were some questions asked, some concerns raised about whether or not that iteration of the project would fully meet the very complex needs of the Secretary of State for all of the citizens of California for the Cal Access Replacement System. So the Secretary, she made a very bold decision, and that was to pause the activity and conduct an independent assessment. So an outside entity was brought in to look at the solution, to look at our requirements, and to tell us in a very objective way if that solution would meet the needs of the state of California. Their determination was that it would not. And their recommendation was that we basically start over. So that was the message that the Secretary moved forward with. So that is bringing us to where we are today. How we moved from that past to today is we conducted a lot of lessons learned activities. And I know sometimes we do that and then that goes into a drawer and we never look at it again. That's not what we did. We looked at those lessons learned because we now are very determined that this project will become publicly available, and to do that, we have to learn from what went wrong before. So some of those lessons learned included we expanded the number of staff in our project management office to make sure that we had the sufficient staff on board to be able to oversee the project, to be able to guide. We also partnered with California Department of Technology, which is basically what all IT projects are supposed to do within the state of California. And so we partnered with them through the project approval lifecycle process, which is a complex, long, very tedious process of fully documenting all of the business needs and requirements. Once we finished that, we continued partnering with California Department of Technology through their statewide technology procurement group of folks. They guided the procurement for the Cal Access process, the Cal Access Replacement System. And now that the procurement is over, we've selected a vendor. We are still partnering with CDT, California Department of Technology, in an independent project oversight role. So they're continuing to stay with us through the duration of the project. We also brought on an independent verification and validation consultant, IVNV, also to provide that oversight for us. We've taken a look at what can we do internally to better prepare our staff to be able to interact with our prime vendor. And we're using an agile methodology as we're going through this development process. Denise will talk about that in a few minutes when she gets to an overview of the project. But what we have found is that we can say, oh, agile, but people don't know what that means. They don't know the terminology. So we hired an agile coach trainer who developed training and coaching material for SOS staff. And we're also making a subset of that training available to our external stakeholders who will be participating in the project as we go along. So those are just a couple of the things that we have done so far. What I'm going to do is I'll just kind of click forward and I will go to the agenda. I'll just let the agenda slide show here. There we go. While I continue to make a couple of other comments. So we're going to be covering these items, but before we get to those details, there are a few other items I'd like to share with you as some background. One of the things that we've done that is really significant is within Secretary of State, we have formed a really strong leadership team. And that leadership team has made a commitment that we're going to see this project through and we're going to be very open and transparent about whatever is happening along the course of this project. So we feel we have an excellent team, and it's not just SOS internal folks, it's also all of the contracted people that are coming into the project, because the team is the whole of internal and external folks, so it's not just us. What I'd like you also to know is as we are reaching out to some of our external partners, you being one of them, I want you to know that us being here today is not the first communication that we're having with FPPC staff. So we have biweekly project status reports, and Galena West and Dominika Wajenska regularly attend those meetings and have been for about the last year or so. Aside from CARS meetings, my assistant division chief, we meet bi-weekly with Galena and Chloe Hackert. And that's a way for us to just stay in touch with what other activities might be going on from a business perspective that might be impacting each other. So an example of that is we've worked with Chloe as the PREP program was being rolled out, the Political Reform Education Program. And what we found as a result of working with Chloe on that was we decided that one of our waiver forms could be simplified to make it easier for people to fill that out and therefore easier for us to review. So the reason I'm telling you that is to just show that this spirit of collaboration is not only happening with the CARS project, but also with just the regular business operations that we are doing within the Political Reform Division now and as we are acting with FPPC staff. One of the things that we have been doing is we have restarted our external stakeholder meetings. When we were going through the procurement process, we needed to pause those. Those meetings started again in August. And during that August meeting, we just basically welcomed back our external stakeholders. Last week, we shared with them an overview of the approach we'll be using for the CARS project. That's why we're here today, is to make sure you also hear that approach of what we're going to be taking with the CARS project. And what we would like to make sure is that you're aware of what we're doing. And what we're hoping is that if you have questions, you will ask us. Even, you might need some time to be thinking about those things and getting back to us. But what we're hoping is that you will feel comfortable with the approach that we're taking and know that we are taking your considerations into account. So as we start looking at the CARS leadership team, this doesn't want to click so well. I'm sorry. There we go. Okay. So I'll tell you briefly about the CARS project leadership team. But before this team of people that you're seeing right here on the screen, the team is bigger than this. So of course it starts with the secretary herself. And the secretary stays very informed and in tune with what's going on with the project. We also have our Chief Deputy Secretary of State, Lisa Martin, and Reggie Fair, our Deputy of Operations. They meet with the project team weekly to make sure that they are staying informed about what is happening with the project, and they're, to offer whatever support is needed to make sure that the project gets what it needs to continue to move forward. The project leadership team, once we start moving down from the executive office, includes myself. I'm the division chief of the Political Reform Division and also the project sponsor. We have Tristan Cormier, who's our chief information officer. Harjeet Basi, she's the project director. She's also the project director of the project management office, and that's a very important relationship that needs to happen within the project, both within ITD and the PMO. And then we have John Heinlein, who's the assistant project director. So when it comes to communications, Harjeet, John, and I, we talk every day. John and I, we talk several times a day. And the point of telling you that is just to let you know that throughout the project, there's an incredible amount of conversation and communication that is going on. So at this point, I'm going to turn the mic over to John Heinlein, the Assistant Project Director. He's going to tell a little bit more about the project team and also show you an organizational chart that shows the people I've mentioned where they fit into the organization of the project. So thank you. Go ahead, John.
You press it one more time.
Green light.
There you go.
Oh, okay. Hi, my name's John Heinlein. I'm the Assistant Project Director for the CARS project. I'm going to go ahead and advance the slide. Oh, well, yeah. Okay, I'm going to sort of repeat some of the stuff Margie said, but I really want to reinforce it. And just to give you a little background, I've been with the SOS for 2 years. I was brought on right pretty much when the CARS planning effort began. And we've been working together, Margie and myself and others, to get it to where we are today. But before that, I worked at the Department of Technology for 6 years, and I worked at the Office of Systems Integration for 9 years, all in IT project, capacities of various types. And I got to, that experience really made me aware of where projects cannot succeed, especially if there's certain areas that they don't follow best practices. And one of the things, this basically is a representation of kind of what Margie just talked about. This is our leadership team, and it talks about the executive leadership, and then Margie, the CIO, Harjeet, myself, and then our team below that. We have a really good team of our own CARS project management team. We had to, in some cases, hire out to get experts in like schedule management, requirements management. We have all the divisions of the SOS help support us in various ways, contracts, fiscal. But one thing I wanted to note here is a good sign that a project, is set up well is when you have executive leadership, or executive sponsorship, identified and they're engaged. And in this project, they're very engaged. They attend our status meetings, they attend our risk and issue meetings, and they help work with us, overcome challenges, remove roadblocks. It's a good relationship, and it was set up well. Okay, next slide. So this is our internal and external stakeholder. This represents all of our projects, internal and external stakeholders. And again, another sign that a project's on the right track is if they've early on identified all their stakeholders and got them, have a plan to engage them throughout the entire process, through planning and through execution. And this chart represents both internal SOS groups as well as external, including yourselves, and the data filers, data consumers, the interface partners, third-party software vendor interface partners, critical group of folks that we're going to be engaging soon. But you don't want to, on projects in the past that I've seen, if they don't recognize all the stakeholders early on, or they think they can bring in a partner later, it's a sign that there's going to be trouble. But in this case, I think we've done our due diligence to identify all stakeholders, and we're going to elicit their feedback, bring them in if we need to for design and for testing to ensure they're bought into the solution.
Quick question for you.
Sure.
So I'm looking at all these different stakeholders, and I love that you're laying this out because I think it's really important with this system to get as much information from the whole universe, people involved with this, users, the systems that are going to be integrated with this, right? As far as the regulated community, how are they reflected in this chart? When I say regulated community, I mean the candidates and the committees that are going to be using the system. Are they're the data filers?
Yeah. I can pass it over to Margie, but yes, that's my understanding. They're the data filers.
Okay, and then the data consumers, they're the public, the press?
That would be the public, the press, anybody who is wanting to access the data for whatever reasons they would like to access that data.
Excellent. And then electronic filing vendors.
Right. So we have a number of software vendors who currently submit data to CalAccess on behalf of their customers, who are those data filers. So it's important that we engage them early as well, because they're a significant part of what the solution will contain. Does that
Excellent.
answer your question?
Thank you. It does. Commissioner Baker?
Just super quick and follow up, but thank you. I was writing down the same question, Mr. Chair. So you mentioned the data consumers are public and press. Can you, at some point in your presentation, will you say more about the public? Like who is the representative of the public that is a stakeholder in that respect? Like who? So you may be addressing that down the line. Thank you.
Yeah, and the universities, watchdog agencies, Common Cause, those sort of organizations. But we'll touch on that. Okay, next slide. Okay, CARS opportunities. Yeah, I wanted to make a few points about this before we move on. So yeah, just to set a little context before we get into our prime vendor partner, giving the overview of the solution. We wanted to let you know that for 2 years, we've been working and developing, for a large part of that time, the solicitation document to hire the prime vendor. The RFP, request for proposal. That's what we developed, and part of the creation of that solicitation document was to realize these opportunities, automate processes, enhance data quality and validation, implement a modern data-driven and secure system, enhance filer efficiency, and improve public information access. And a lot of these are driven by, the challenges that we're facing with the current legacy CalAccess, where there's manual processes for data validation, systems running on old unsupported software that can't be updated to accommodate changes in the Political Reform Act, and system having only limited online information access, audit and reporting filing capabilities. So then these opportunities were built into our solicitation document, and we asked the vendor, or any vendor who was bidding on this project, to provide their response in these 8 key areas that they're listed here. So these are and the reason I'm sort of pointing this out is because these, you'll recognize in the presentation you're about to see, these are the areas they're gonna walk through. And it sort of represented what we asked the vendors to provide and how the evaluation was conducted. So with that, I'm gonna pass it over to Denise Tower, CGI Project Manager, and her for the solution approach overview.
Thanks, John. Hello, everyone. My name's Denise Tower. I represent CGI. I've been in IT for 30-plus years, managing large-scale software development projects. Most recently, in the last 10 years or so, a lot of large agile projects. So my experience hopefully will lend to this project and help it move forward in an agile way and hopefully success. So the CGI organization, you can see as the project manager, we're organizing into functional towers to integrate with SOS and their staff. Testing, you'll see, will be focused on user acceptance testing, interface testing with our partners and our stakeholders. We have development staff, a business lead, Laura Curlin, who comes from MapLight, and I'll talk about that partner in a moment, with a lot of experience with PRD. Database lead will be responsible for data conversion and the database itself. Solution architects, we're going to be doing this solution in the cloud, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then training and OCM, organizational change management, will focus on working on the training of all our partners, including the PRD staff and external stakeholders, and making sure we're developing the appropriate training for the appropriate resources. Okay. Project management approach that we're using is an integrated system, so we're making sure we develop a modern solution in a cloud that's going to provide performance stability, redundancy. We brought in some experts in infrastructure and software development and agile. As Margie mentioned, SOS has agile coaches training people on that who don't have that kind of experience, but we'll work through that with everybody to make sure we all move down the same train track going forward. It's a custom solution. I'll talk about MapLight in a minute, who's a key partner. They're going to set and have a code ready for us for acceleration into development as we start the first sprint. So they'll have a base set of code with some functionality that's been installed in a couple of cities, Denver and Minneapolis, and then we'll build the custom solution on top of that and customize it for the California requirements. Our partner MapLight, as I mentioned, has got 10 years experience with SOS on the Power Search tool that's out there and available to the public. They've developed some other software that I'll talk about with filer registration and filer disclosure, and that's where we're going to start the application, seeding that with the accelerated code, moving us forward quickly to see results faster. The project schedule, as Margie mentioned, too fast. As Margie mentioned, we're just starting about a couple months ago. We're in phase 1, kickoff and planning. During the planning phase, where we set a lot of the governance documents of how we're going to operate as a team, including test planning, data conversion planning, project management planning, training plans, all those sorts of things are setting the governance for the project moving forward over the next couple of years. In phase 2, we'll get down into the nitty-gritty of designing the system, developing it, testing it, and implementing it in November of 2026 is the target. Then they move into phase 3, which is more of the M&O for the first year of operations of the solution, hopefully no major issues, and just working through making sure it's stable and it's performing as needed. The project schedule, it's just a high-level plan. As I said, we just finished the kickoffs for a couple of the vendors, external stakeholders. We're meeting with you guys as well. We're just in the planning phase of phase 1. We're just getting started into the phase 2 deliverables. We started requirements clarification sessions twice a week with Margie's group, PRD, to make sure we understand what the requirement is and ask any questions before we move into designs. And then you'll see 4 program increments. That's where the heart of the core of the solution is developed, with detailed designs, coding, testing, working with the external stakeholders on their API, making sure they understand the specifications, and then being able to code to it and fit in our timeline and then test with them directly. So we've got 18 months or so of moving through the program increments. There'll be a final testing phase. You'll see there where we do the final, everything's all integrated together, solution's complete. We've got the APIs with the external stakeholders ready to go. Public access is going to be available for our testers. And we'll pull it all together and make sure it works before we go live. And then that's when the training will occur. There's going to be various forms of training available for all the various stakeholders and what's the appropriate ones for the appropriate resources. Okay, any questions about the schedule?
I have one quick question.
Sure.
So I think November after the election is obviously the ideal time to launch something like this. A lot of amendments obviously come in right after the election. Is SOS planning to leave up the current system and launch this new system? How would that sort of thing work? And I know that's really in the weeds, so if that's something you're still considering, we can punt that to later on.
I think it's probably still under consideration on how we're going to move forward with that. But as things happen, because this is a long project, and a long project, you always have to be aware of in-flight things coming through. So we'll be working with Margie and Harjeet on making sure we understand things that are coming through. Anything we can plan before we go live, we'll make sure we handle. But the other stuff afterwards, we'll figure out the game plan there.
Excellent.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you for the detailed presentation. I've learned a lot in a few minutes. But one of my questions is, are there any, you might have touched on it, but are there any other jurisdictions, either at the local level or state level, that are currently utilizing this technology?
You mean the cloud technology or the actual solution
The
itself?
actual system that's going to be ultimately implemented.
MapLight, are you referring to people using MapLight right now?
Well, I'm just, my question is, maybe just make it real basic. We're going to implement CARS at the state level.
Right.
Are there any other jurisdictions in the state or in the country or anywhere that are going to be utilizing the same technology that's similar to what CARS will be utilizing?
So they use the similar technology, which is the infrastructure side of it, the cloud, the security, the services. Those are all common services available to many industries. The solution part of it, the application, Power Search is in production today for California. So we're going to be building on that and enhancing that per the requirements. The MapLight solution, which I talked about earlier, is going to base code is in City of Denver, City of Minneapolis, and I think the state of Maine. But we are going to be developing a custom solution for California because there's many more requirements. So the base would be in certain areas, but we're going to be building on top of that.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, next slide. So the program increments are important from the application perspective. With Agile, you want to see things early and fast. So program increment 1, we put a lot of meat in that first one, filer registration and disclosure. You'll see there, working with the e-filers part 1, which is the API. We want to get the specification out to them early so that they have time to adjust their systems and develop their solutions along our timeline. And in program increment 2, you'll see part 2 is we'll probably pull it in and start testing with them to make sure everyone's in sync of where we need to go. And then part 3, you get, the financial transactions, user support, all those things. And the last increment is the reports. So really the meat is in program increment 1, and we're hoping for some early wins so we can demonstrate the system's working properly and the solution, make sure everybody's comfortable with the direction that we're heading in over the next couple of years. So we're not waiting a year to see it for the first time. So it'll be very exciting to get started with the development, which is probably mid-December of this year. So we'll start seeing the solution come out after that. Okay. Maybe I got to get closer. There we go. So we talked about Agile a little bit. This is CGI's Adaptive SI, but you've probably heard Agile or Scrum or some of these other terms out here. We'll be working with the Secretary of State's team. The most important piece of this is in the middle where we configure and develop the solution. So we're going to design it iteratively, which program increment 1, which I talked about, we'll develop it the same way. We'll allow the Secretary of State and the PRD staff to actually look at the system early, and they can start doing their own user acceptance testing. So we're not waiting to the end, and we'll continually evolve the application, which allows for a lot of wins along the way and successes with the team to make sure we're moving in the right direction. Oh.
Commissioner Baker?
Thank you. I appreciate it. One of my big questions is, okay, what is this Agile? And I haven't heard of Scrum. Sorry, it's just
Okay.
not my background.
Okay.
Is it steps? Can you characterize what Agile is? Because yes, I use that terminology as well as I want my organization to be agile, but I feel like this is with the capital A. So try again on that,
Okay, sure.
if you could.
So old school software development, you do requirements first, and then 2 months later you design, and then 2 months later or 3 months later you do development, and then you test, and maybe a year later, Margie would get to see the system. With Agile, you put practices in place where you're integrated with the team. So they have a team that we stand up called a Scrum team. It's made up of business people, technology people, project management people, trainers, testers, and usually work in 2-week increments. Okay, so we'll identify, hey, we're gonna work on filer registration today, and we're gonna work on these 3 screens, and in 2 weeks, Margie, we're gonna show you what those screens look like. And then we have daily meetings versus monthly meetings and stuff. So the teams will meet daily with their business partners about, hey, what am I developing? So it gives the developer opportunity to meet with the business people on a regular basis, which helps them to evolve the solution and make sure we're delivering what we're supposed to deliver. And then you have reviews and demos and things all along the way. Every 2 weeks, you're seeing something come back from the developers, which is essential because a lot of them are remote and you can kind of see their solutions coming to light. Does that help?
It does. Very, very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so the architecture, I won't go into the weeds on this, but really it's like we talked about, it's customizable, it's going to be stable. I know there's some pain points around performance, so we'll be addressing that. Security standards that are available in some of the common services in the Microsoft Azure cloud. So we're going to be making sure it's a modern application that can live on and uses a lot of the tools and solutions that are available today. Okay. Okay, so again, I know this is a funky picture for everyone to kind of look at. The most important thing, if you look in the middle, it's going to be a multi-tiered, multi-region solution. So if one of the regions goes down, you don't lose access to the application. You have redundancy, which is where you want to be with a critical application with public access. They'll be able to get into the solution and continue to work on their activities. As I mentioned, so we have a bunch of layers. So you'll see all the stakeholders are at the top. You'll see the next layer underneath, it's the channels. There's going to be lots of portals for the public, for actually FPPC to work through their activities. Then you'll see it's going to be organized into business management services and common services, which is really important for a layered application where we're going to utilize all the modern tools and security that are available in the Microsoft Azure cloud and be able to build that kind of an application for the Secretary of State. Already mentioned, we're in the Azure Government Cloud. There's the 2 different clouds. There's a commercial and a government. The government cloud provides for more compliance to regulations, which provides more security and options like that for the clients. It will be scalable. Like I said earlier, it's multi-region, so it will be a really good opportunity for our Secretary of State to be in the cloud. Talked about MapLight a little bit. So MapLight's seeding the code. Again, like their solution, the disclosure system is already available in the city of Denver and Minneapolis in the state of Maine. And I'll talk a little bit about what pieces we'll be using to start with to help accelerate. So one of the big pieces is the filers. So there's going to be 2 ways into the system, through the data screens or our applications and electronic filing, but they all go through the same validation rules. So it's not 2 separate paths. It's one path coming through the same rules, which is really important for consistency and in the application process to make sure everyone's following the same rules and guidelines, and the reports will be filed no matter which way they come in. So that's an important piece to start with. Then it will provide PRD functionality to be the administrators of the system. You can see they'll manage the filers and the filings, the system data, the reviewing the reports. There'll be audit trails for everything that happens within the system. That will be available to Margie and her staff. There'll be public access. And the important thing here is there's different levels of public access from casual to advanced, but it will provide them with opportunities to see the top 10 lists if you're the casual user, the summaries of activities, graphical displays that are available for people. If you're more of an intermediate user and you like to do really cool advanced searches, you'll have that opportunity to do that as well with different various data elements that are available in the system. And if you're a super duper user and you like to get into the really cool stuff, you get to do data downloads. There's a public API. This is an example from the city of Denver where 3 different public agencies started wanting to see different views of the data. By doing the data downloads in the public API, you'll be able to utilize the system with you need to use it, but that's more for the power user. So the casual to the power user will have the opportunity to see the data in whatever form they'd like to see it in.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I'm looking at the accessibility in your things. And assume that I, as a person, will be able to access this information, correct? Like, right now, I can go to Cal Access and see who has contributed to X, Y, or Z. Is that, will I continue
you'll
to
be-
have
you
that
go through-
access?
through the public
And will
portal.
it be designed in a simple way that people who are not technical can follow? Because right now, when I have accessed it, I need to remember how was it that I did. If I'm gone for a couple of months, I have to go through. Once you get in and remember, it's easier. So easiness of accessibility, I think, will be for folks, not big time people.
Right, that's why there's gonna be 3 layers for the casual user, the public through the public portal, then the intermediate, if you like to do advanced searches. And I think if you're a registered account, then you'll be able to save those searches, so you don't have to remember the next time. You'll just be able to pull it up and use it again.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Baker?
Thank you. One of the, as I just look at out in the digital world, when there's complaints about the existing system, they tend to be about the search functions, the system's down, especially during close to elections when you want to have that information, and how quickly information that's filed is then present. Or if either at some point in your presentation, will you be able to comment on how much you're hearing about that and how the system will address that again? So how easy it is to search, the problem of the system being down just from sheer volume, maybe that has to go with legacy software that doesn't exist anymore or something, and then how quickly information that's filed can be available.
So let's address the downtime. Again, with the 2 regions in the cloud, that's going to address that for stability. So you'll have that opportunity, like unlike the legacy system. The accessibility for searching, like I said, just talked about, we're going to have different levels for people. So it should have access to all the data they need to be able to search at the level they want to search at. And then, sorry, what was the third piece there?
That was how quickly information, once it's filed, can be populated up and public facing. Just back on the search one, for example, we have decades worth of advice letters, and you can go to our website and search for things, and then a lot of information can come at you, and then the user is trying to navigate, okay, how do I prioritize? How do I get further into the rabbit hole where I want to be? And although our team does a great job of improving our our website and accessibility, so I think I'm looking for a little more detail if you're able to provide on the nimbleness of the search function and user-friendly nature of it, knowing that it's not all here yet. You can't demonstrate it.
Right.
The other one is how quickly info's up.
I think it's going to be real-time data available. Now, what real-time means, we'll have to, as we get into the design of the system and how all workflows into it, and that we'll get back to you in the next time we come out and talk to you. And as far as the nimbleness, I think as we get into, the requirements are pretty clear from the Secretary of State of what they want from the public to be able to search at the different levels. There's criteria we have to be available. What fields can you search on, all that stuff. So as we get into the design phase, we can probably talk a little bit more in detail of what we're actually going to be providing going forward. Getting into the data, that's very old and a lot. Data conversion and migration. So that's one of the key areas of any large project is how do you get all that data into the system. So we're really focused on that. The Secretary of State has done a lot of work already cleaning up the data and cleansing it to make sure it can move into a new modern application. Our focus is on quality and making sure we can load it all into production, but we also have to handle the data that we can't move because it's not conforming to the standards. We can't work, it's 20 years old, we got problems. We're still gonna save all of that data to make sure it's there. And if there's any transactions from filers or whatever that can't get converted into the new system for whatever reason, it got flagged as an issue, we're going to be saving those and be able to work with them to make sure they get them cleaned up and be able to move that data into the system. So we're accounting for the good stuff and the bad stuff that we have to track going forward with any big project. Does that make sense? Nope.
Yes.
Commissioner Baker?
Thank you. I'm looking at that last bullet point. And is that, when you say non-conforming transactions, do you mean not in this data conversion necessarily, but if somebody did something wrong
No,
which
it's
is kind
just-
of in our wheelhouse, but
No, it's
Okay.
if the data is incorrect, they typed in the wrong, like it's supposed to be numeric or alphanumeric and it doesn't, or they didn't fill in a field that's required, like an
Okay.
index field or something like that. That's it. Just nothing to do with the functionality behind the data. It's just, is the data in the right formats and stuff that's required.
thank you.
That's a great point. Thanks for clarifying that.
Well, it's a provocative bullet point you have there.
I might have to change that. Okay, so interfaces. Margie and John talked a little bit more about interfaces where we have a lot of stakeholders on this project and a lot of people that we need to make sure keep informed of where we're heading over the next couple of years, because it is a long project and it's hard to keep everybody focused on what the goals are and stuff like that. So we'll be having a lot of frequent and open communications with all the key people that are involved in the project. Just like we said, we had the external stakeholder meeting. We're going to start meeting with the filers, the 23 of them, different groups, so they understand the schedule and where we're heading and how we're going to be interacting with them and the solution going forward.
On that point, what sort of reception have you had from the regulated community? A lot of participation?
So far, we've only had 2 external stakeholder meetings since we rolled out again. And they are, they're expressing that they're just thankful that we're having the meetings, that we're starting to have the meetings early. At this point, we don't have a lot of specific details to share with them yet, but they seem to be happy that we're going in that direction.
That's the general consensus that I've heard as well.
Thank you,
So
good.
very complimentary and appreciative of the fact that you're making this an open process, which I think is very important. Go ahead.
Sure. So part of interface management, there's some key things we have to keep in mind, because with 23 filers and things like that, it's open communication, which we talked about, security, making sure we're following good security practices with the files coming in, versioning, like if 23 different groups are using different files, that causes a lot of problems for your system, so make sure we're all in sync there, and monitoring in the performance of what's going on with those files to make sure we can communicate if we've got any issues or the performance problems, we can make sure we're making appropriate connections. Change management is really important with lots of different stakeholders. Everybody needs to be on the same version at the same time. If changes need to come in, we got to make sure we're communicating and working together on those sorts of things. And obviously testing to make sure it works appropriately before we go live, and documentation to make sure everyone understands where we're heading and what are the specifications supposed to be. Okay. Testing, I'll just briefly talk about that. We're doing some pretty detailed testing. SOS has their test staff already assembled, working diligently, trying to work through testing activities like planning and design and execution. We're tracking defects so we all understand if we didn't deliver what we needed to, how do we fix it going forward. There's various stages of testing. On this page, I won't go through all of them. One of the important ones, obviously, is what you talked about, is reliability and performance testing to make sure it's, the transactions are occurring as the time that they're supposed to be. Functional testing, making sure it's working properly. User acceptance testing, make sure all the key stakeholders and Margie's staff is accepting the system, that it's functioning how they're expecting it to function, and making sure the security testing that we've met all the scans and appropriate stuff that needs to happen while we're working the application in the cloud. Training, we have pretty robust teams. There's an OCM training team on Secretary of State that's integrating with our team. The approach we're using here is train the trainer. So we'll be training the SOS staff, the super users, and then they'll be training the rest of their staff. We have an industry standard process we use where we analyze it, we design it, implement it, and then evaluate it, where we have to understand for each group of stakeholders, what's the appropriate training for them? Is it self-paced learning? Is it instructor-led? Is it a webinar? Is it YouTube? What's the best way to communicate with all the groups on how to use the new system and how they're going to be interacting with the new system? So we'll be working directly with the Secretary of State's OCM work person, the organizational change management, and make sure we're all on the same page and the best way to communicate with all the different groups.
So question on training. So it sounds like you all are going to train the super users. Who are those? The filing officers, the net files, for example, are those the super users?
So it'll be a combination. There'll be those people as well as super users on Margie's staff, the PRD staff.
Okay, and then they're going to go ahead and they're going to be training the typical filers, right? Okay, so if a filer is concerned about switching over to the system, they've been using this old system for decades, they should be looking out for trainings from those those super users.
Right, and when we think of the train-the-trainer model, so PRD staff will be some of those trained and who will then train others. So exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah.
Kind of on a related point, I'm making an assumption here, but will you have webinars, other training materials online? Because I find your website very easy to navigate as a casual user.
Oh,
But in terms of training for the new system, I'm assuming you'll have in-person training on some level, and then, of course, online training.
the specific details haven't been fully worked
Right.
out yet, but in the plan are a variety of different training options. So webinar, online, in person. So there's a wide variety of options that we will be
Okay.
offering,
Thank you.
depending on the user group.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
what
Thank you.
works best. Mhm.
Okay, I'll pass it back to Margie.
Okay, thank you. So we're almost finished here. And so going forward, what I just want to restate is that we're just very happy to be here to share this information with you. And Commissioner Baker, this information might really resonate with you based on a question you asked previously about Agile. So as I mentioned earlier, we have hired an Agile coach trainer to train internally. What does this mean? What does it mean to be agile? What does it mean to interact in that environment? So what we are doing is we're preparing 2 45-minute training sessions for our external stakeholders. And we are using the October and November already scheduled external stakeholder meetings for those trainings, because it's just as important for our external stakeholders to know what's a sprint, what's a scrum, what's a backlog, what's a program increment. All the language that Denise was using, it's important for external and internal folks to know what that means in terms of the project. So for all of you, you will be invited to those meetings if you would like to attend them. And we do intend to video those trainings and post them on our website, so our external stakeholders will be able to access those and refresh their memories at any time.
Commissioner
So,
Wilson?
oh,
As you were using your creative acronyms, I was trying to Google some of those just to see what I could come up with. You may have already, and probably already thought of this, but would you have a glossary of terms available, for example, with those frequently used terms for the casual user, where they can just go to a, index of terms and look them up?
I'm
You may already
guessing
have that already.
Guessing that will be, I think we'll write that down.
That's a
to
great
make
idea.
sure.
We'll make sure
Yes.
we add that to
Yes.
when we have the videos out there.
At this point, our goal was to share this information with you and to ask if you have any further questions of us at this time, knowing you're probably going to think of more later. But at this time, do you have any thoughts about our direction?
Well, first, I just want to thank you all for coming again. This has been really helpful. This is something that we get, at least I can say I get questions about quite often. So I thought it'd be helpful if we could get from you kind of a short summary of what we would tell somebody if they asked us about Cal Access and where it is. I mean, based on the feedback that you've provided us, it sounds to me like SOS identified issues with the previous approach that was implemented by the previous secretary, right? And then subsequent to that, you've adopted a new plan, a new approach that's based on best practices in private industry as well as government, right? And is also already used by other local jurisdictions and state jurisdictions. And you have a plan to have this finished within, it sounds like, 2 years, which is very impressive.
Yeah, about 27 months of development time, then with the warranty period. So, yeah, a little over 2 years. I don't want to shorten
Yeah,
that
no,
time. I don't want to say that out loud.
I don't blame you at all.
Right.
So we have that that date that you laid out and that you plan on working with all the stakeholders in the area. So is that the gist of it? Is that
Yes, and what I think is also very important is to highlight that within the Secretary of State, the Secretary has identified this project as the most significant project in the agency right now. And that, I think, carries a lot of weight in terms of the importance that the Secretary puts on this project, which encourages all of us, if not creates a lot of pressure for us to perform. But, you know, I do think that is significant.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And I can say that in my previous work with the secretary, I found her to be an amazing leader. I think she's going to do a great job with this. Commissioner Wilson, you have something?
I think, you summed it up. The chair covered it as well. And in your presentation that, the three of you made today, you also outlined why the secretary kind of restarted the project, because the ultimate goal is to make sure that the final product meets the needs of all of the, users and so forth. So, thank you.
Commissioner Baker?
Thank you. Comment and a couple quick questions, hopefully. One for Director West, so coming your way. But on the comment, I would say anything that Dr. Weber, Secretary Weber, has decided is a priority that she's personally involved in, I'm pretty sure is going to create not only a little bit of pressure for you, but that's a good thing to hear. And so I'm not at all surprised. Two questions, one for you. One is looking back just a little bit more, because we have actually the benefit of your experience having to do a lessons learned. And since you're available to us and have taken time to be here, I kind of want to ask for our own knowledge in helping our agency and government. I think this one may be for Mr. Heinlein. You did identify that when some things don't happen, it could set a project up for greater likelihood of problems. And what things helped, having the executive leadership and sponsorship early, which kind of sounds like that agile process to some degree, having them early and regularly involved. And the other is the same with the stakeholders. Are there any other examples you can give for us for a lesson learned, that here's something else that if you have a project similar to the scope and scale that you just want to make sure you take care of? And again, I'm just taking advantage of you being here and available to us.
No, I'm glad you asked that. In fact, I can send you, there's a list called the Dirty Dozen Reasons Projects you don't succeed. And some of it has to do with, you have to have effective governance. Your governance and decision-making process has to be clear and followed. Organizational change management is important, and that's distinct from users getting trained on the new system. It's getting them, especially users that may be a little bit, maybe they like the system they have, or they're used to it, and they're a little leery of this new system and how it's going to affect their world. You have a team, you hire a team who's expert in this field to come in and come in early, understand their needs, understand their concerns, and work with them to understand how the new system will affect their world, and make sure that what their feedback is heard, maybe not implemented, but it's heard. And that way the likelihood of your system being adopted by those users is good. Otherwise, there's systems, if you don't do that, the users don't like the system, they don't adopt it, they find workarounds, and it's not effective. So organizational change management is another one.
Sure.
There's others too. Offhand, I can't think of some.
Well, I'll put you on the spot for that, but yeah.
But we'll send you that list, because
Thank you.
it's actually a really good list. CDT, Department of Technology, created it, and we ensured that each one was touched on, so that we didn't go down that path.
Yes, well, thank you, because I'll be happy to take the Dirty Dozen. I'm grateful for that. But also, just again, as we commissioners and our executive team also, as they're navigating change in the future, the only other looking back question I have was the Department of Technology, you described how they are very much involved early and regularly, and they've provided this Dirty Dozen, and were they not so much in the past?
You want to take that, Marge?
With the previous iteration of the project, they were not
Okay,
involved.
helpful to know, because again, we may have our own things to change, and put that on my list of things to ask if there's a future project. With respect to the public engagement, you mentioned Common Cause, universities, watchdog groups. Makes sense. These are folks that spend their professional time. I'm kind of curious, there are other agencies or associations, as Treasurers Association, Political Consultants Association, So these are practitioners as well. Are they happen to be involved? That's sometimes a question we ask when we're looking for feedback on
Yes.
regulations.
Yes, the California Professional Treasurers Association and others similar to that, they regularly attend our external stakeholder meetings. And I feel that PRD has taken a lot of steps in the last year to strengthen that relationship, not only cars related, but also business operations related.
Great. And I guess I'm thinking of what you determined was the casual user, somebody who maybe it's a first-time candidate or somebody's first-time treasurer. And we have a process of where if we're doing regulations, we send it out to interested parties. They probably tend to be more professionals involved in it. And perhaps you have some way in which you're doing outreach to try to rope in some feedback from folks who are maybe a little bit early in their career involvement for something like that. That's my point. No particular question there. And my only question for Galena West, our director, is there anything we can help as commissioners, our team, from your perspective, and maybe that you can come back to us with that, on what we can be doing to support the good work of the Secretary of State's office on this, or our own team, just from a commissioner's point of view, what can we do to help?
Sure. Galena West, Executive Director. You can be very positive when anybody asks you about it and really put the word out that this is a great thing that's being done and encourage people to participate. Because as you can see, Secretary of State is looking for input. So they're really open. So if anybody asks you about it, then you can refer them to the Secretary of State's website and they can see how they can get involved because they really want different perspectives. And then for us, what we are doing as staff that we'll be presenting to you is looking at the law to seeing if there's things that we need to recommend for either the legislative or regulatory projects for next year to maybe clean up some rules that would work better with a more efficient system. Because as you know, for years, we've been working around form changes and things that weren't really possible. So as we devote staff time to that, then maybe some other projects wouldn't get the top priority over those. And then we'll be presenting those possibilities to you. And then we can all work together to make this really successful.
Excellent. Any other questions from commissioners? I think it's also worth noting that we sent several representatives over to the California Political Treasurers Association's annual event. I think we had 3 different staff members, maybe 4. I presented personally. We got a lot of questions about this, so it sounds like they absolutely want to participate, the treasurers, NetFile, some of the other vendors. So I think you're going to get a lot of public comment.
We are very familiar with our vendors, NetFile specifically, and I believe Kira Rasmussen, our assistant project, not project director, assistant division chief, was also at that meeting. So we do try to attend those when we can.
Excellent.
Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Do we have any public comment on this item? Oh, hearing and seeing none. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate the update and your continued updates. Thank you. I believe we have a technical issue. It's going to require us to take a short break. So we're going to go into recess for a moment so we can handle that. Thank you.
Oh my God.
Okay, we're all back in session. We're going to circle back to item number 1, and that is going to be public comment for items not on today's agenda. Do we have any public comment for items not on today's agenda? Sounds like we have one online or via phone. Go ahead, please.
Oh, hello, this is Steve Petzold calling. On agenda item number 1, I had to listen to that whole presentation you just went through, but I think you have to consider data going in, data going out. I've noticed in this round of the political season that a lot of people are abbreviating and misnaming their committee names. So in particular, they're not identified with all the voting actions rights and the areas. People are not identifying in their committee name the area they're running for. And in many instances, they're also misnaming their committee. So the Santa Clarita Community College Board can actually end up as COC or College of the Canyon. And when you go into Cal Access and you're looking for these committees, it can be very confusing because it depends on the name that they're using. So that's just one of the things that I'm seeing this, and hopefully you can get a one-stop shopping, because when I get a committee name, I have to go down to the Los Angeles County clerk's office to pull up the campaign finance document. So the 24-hour statements and all of that other information, the semi-annuals, I can't get that at the Cal Access site. So just finding the committee names and having to go down to LA County, and their stuff, to the best of my knowledge, really isn't online. You have to request it and have them mail you the information. So hopefully you can get this all integrated so that as a user in the public, we don't have to waste a lot of time going around. So I guess the other statement that I had was that I hope that Governor Newsom gave proper recognition to the people who are the complainants in many of these FPPC actions. In our local communities, we're often looked at as busybodies, and the very word that you use as complainant makes it sound as if, we're bad neighbors, when actually the whole system that you have down there relies on individuals like myself who look for stuff that might be a little shady or a little wrong or not compliant. We file the appropriate actions with your agency. So, I know that I'm not looking for any special recognition other than the fact that the system depends on people like us to enforce the regulations of the FPPC. I wanted to comment on item 14. I don't know if you're going to let me skip to that or.
Yeah, why don't, if you wouldn't mind, if you could hold that comment until we pull item 14 for discussion. As far as the public comment you've already made, I certainly agree with you in terms of sentiment regarding local activists, local watchdogs. I think you're an important, crucial piece of the political process and our process in enforcing the law. So I absolutely would thank you and others who make sure that our public officials are held accountable. As far as the Cal Access comments you made, I'd suggest, like they had mentioned, that you provide any sort of feedback that you have to them via their website. It sounds like they have a channel where you can provide that information, and they're looking for it so that they can make a system that's accessible to all types of users. So with that, I think time for public comment has elapsed, and we will wait for item number 14 to hear your comments on that specific item. Any additional public comment from other commenters? No? Seeing and hearing none, why don't we move on to item number 3, and that's going to be approval of the August 2024 meeting minutes. Do we have any suggested changes from commissioners on those minutes? I don't see any. Do we have a motion for approval?
I move the adoption of the minutes.
Second?
Second.
No, you beat me to it. Okay, do we have any public comment on the minutes? Hearing and seeing none, Ms. Linker?
Commissioner Baker?
Aye.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Chair Silver?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Excellent. Well, why don't we move on to the consent calendar, which is items 4 through 7 on the agenda. I'd like to remove item number 5. Are there other items that commissioners would like to remove from the consent calendar?
Move to approve the other item, exception number 5.
Before we get to that, just want to make sure there's no other items that commissioners want to remove. Commissioner Wilson?
Item, but I want to make just a brief comment on item number 4.
Okay, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we
It's more-
lay out what's the consent calendar?
Okay.
And then we'll,
Okay.
perfect. Okay, so 5 is going to be taken off the consent calendar. So the consent calendar is going to be 4, items 4, 6 through 7. Commissioner Wilson?
Yeah, I was just going to say on item number 4, I found that the outline by the staff, the summary by the staff was excellent, especially as it relates to the streamlined process. So just wanted to make that comment that it was very informative in that regard. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other comments, Commissioner Baker?
Thank you. I was just going to inquire if we can, without pulling it off a consent, this was something that was referred from the LA Ethics Commission, if I remember correctly. It may be the first time I've seen that, or if there's a reason why something gets referred to us versus they deal with it completely. And I'm happy to take a quick answer of that one, if that's possible, without otherwise affecting this being on the consent
Sure.
calendar.
Enforcement Chief Lindsay, would you please join us and address that point? Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners.
Good morning.
James Lindsay, Enforcement Chief. It was out of their jurisdiction. So it was referred to us because they could not enforce this particular matter.
Good to know. Thank you.
That's helpful. And generally, I just want to note that some of these cases that we're closing today, they're relatively old cases. I'm glad we're getting them off the docket, off of our backlog. I know it's very difficult to close some of these cases, specifically defaults, where you have respondents that just do not respond, despite that moniker. So thank you for your diligent attention, the Enforcement Division's diligent attention to these specific cases. I know it can be frustrating when you're trying to get a hold of someone and they just refuse to respond to you. So with that, I believe we have a motion.
Motion? Do I repeat it?
Well, I move to approve the consent calendar, so items 4, 6, and 7. Have a second?
Second.
Excellent. Ms. Linker?
Commissioner Baker?
Aye.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Chair Silver?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Perfect. Okay, well, let's move on to item number 5. That's going to be in the matter of Ramos for City Council 2018, committee to elect Daniel Ramos Adelanto, City Council 2020, Daniel Ramos, Arlie Arseneda. So this item was pushed from last month's agenda to this month's agenda. Part of the reason why we pushed this item, we delayed it, was because the respondent here indicated that they had additional information and records that they wanted to provide the Enforcement Division to consider. We also wanted the Enforcement Division to go back and verify some of the claims that had been made during the discussion related to this item, including that all the reports that had been required by law to be filed were filed. Respondent did note that all those reports had been filed. So I'm hoping that you can provide us with an update as to the information and records that were provided and whether it is correct that all the outstanding reports for these committees have been filed as the respondent stated.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We have, this is a thick packet, as you know. The last 8 pages of the packet are an addendum to our Exhibit 1. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at that. What happens briefly is that when we put a matter on for pre-notice, we already have our documents done because we don't want to put things on and then not be prepared for it at a later time when we say we're going to be. So the Exhibit 1 was prepared before Mr. Ramos responded to anything. It was only after it was placed on pre-notice that we received some contact from Mr. Ramos. And as we acknowledged at the last meeting, he did prepare some filings and submit some filings. Basically, there were 2 filings that had activity on them. The statement that he has filed everything is not accurate. He had a filing that was due on July 31st, a semi-annual this year that has not been filed, according to the local filing officer. And we have not seen anything regarding that. He has filed some other paperwork relating to his status as a candidate for the upcoming election. He did provide some documentation. As you might recall, he indicated that he had previously provided significant documentation regarding his bank account. That was not accurate. And in fact, he did ultimately give us some documents regarding the bank account, as we have captured in those 8 pages in the addendum. It was somewhat distressing, actually, what we did find in that, which is that the banking institution that he had placed on the 410 was not the banking institution that he ultimately opened an account with. He ultimately opened an account with a different institution only a week before the election, after all of the expenditures that he acknowledges were made and incurred. And so when we didn't get cooperation from Mr. Ramos through the 5 years that this case has been around, previously we had subpoenaed records based upon the institution that he had disclosed. Turned out that we couldn't get any documents because he didn't have a bank account at that particular institution. It was only a few weeks ago that we received some documents that showed that a bank account was opened eventually, but very late, and none of the account money really matches up with the expenditures that was taken out. Almost all of the money, as you'll see, was taken out after the election. And also much of
And Mr. Lindsay, sorry to interrupt you, but for the public's benefit, if you'd like to see a list of the contributions that went into this account and expenditures that were made from this account, you can look at page 191 of the attachment that's included with this item. This is in the addendum that Mr. Lindsay is referring to. So that's page 191 at the bottom. And there's also going to be information related to other disclosed activity on page 187, but what we're talking about right now is on 191.
Correct, thank you. As we noted previously and note again in the addendum, there's a significant amount of stuff that is available on Mr. Ramos's Facebook page that would indicate that a lot more expenditures occurred than what was ultimately disclosed. But we don't have any invoices, he didn't provide anything, and the bank...
Mr. Lynch, just to clarify, when you say stuff, you mean campaign advertisements, so signs, other
Custom
items, hats, shirts.
Exactly, all the things that are in the various pages here, very large signs, different languages, different sizes, polo shirts, hats, etc., events. There's just a lot of stuff here that it's dubious that $2,000 was received. It's dubious that $1,800 was expended. And the bank records aren't particularly helpful. The indication is that he received the $2,000 in October of 2027, although it's reported in the pre-election statement that's earlier than that. The expenditures, as you'll see on the page that Chair Silver noted, they're all occurring almost, other than the $440, they're all occurring after the relevant election. Prohibited cash transactions are occurring in concert with a post-election trip to Las Vegas. There's a lot of concerns here. And, at this point, we have a gentleman that is continuing to run for office. And the ultimately what was filed was not particularly complicated, truthful or not. There's no reason why this took 3, 4, 5 years to get reported, despite our consistent contacts, the local filing officers' consistent contacts. We've expended in the enforcement division hundreds of hours on this case. Just from pre-notice onward, it's probably been over 100 hours. Our special investigator has had to spend considerable amounts of time, even throughout the default process. Our attorney handling the case has done so. Our assistant chief of enforcement over prosecutions and myself have spent considerable amounts of time on this case trying to uncover what's going on, trying to get compliance. Again, as the enforcement division, we want to incentivize compliance, even if it's really late and probably not particularly helpful at this point, but we do want to incentivize that. So we did look at the proposed penalty again, and we have reduced what our recommendation is from the penalty. As you may recall, we were initially recommending $57,500 as the aggregate penalty for all these non and late filings and the bank account issues. We have, I think, confirmed what we suspected before with respect to the Victorville committee that was used in the failed election of 2018. Those are up to date. There's no money attached to any of those filings. And so, in an effort to be reasonable in our recommendation, we have lowered all of those counts relating to the Victorville committee from $4,000 or $4,500, depending on the type of filing it is, down to $1,000 apiece. He hasn't terminated that committee still, despite the fact that we've asked. So there may continue to be, and there are continuing to probably to be filing obligations, but we do want to be reasonable about that. We have increased one penalty as well. That's count number 1 from a recommended $2,000 to $5,000, and that relates to the failure to amend his statement of organization because it had Bank of America on there without an account number, but Bank of America, and it turned out that he did not have an account there. He opened an account later at a different bank, didn't amend his statement. It caused a lot of difficulty, actually impossibility, to fully investigate what was happening with his campaign. And so we are asking for a maximum.
Quick clarifying question. Has respondent indicated why they listed Bank of America rather than the bank that they ultimately did their banking for with this campaign?
No, and in fact, when Mr. Ramos was here and addressed this commission, last month, he didn't make any mention that the bank account that, he ultimately opened was different than the one that, at least at the institution that he put on that 410. Mr. Ramos is a number of the things that he has said has been inaccurate. And this is particularly troubling because of it indicates that there's fairly significant concealment.
Well, thank you for walking us through that. So what I'm hearing is that we received the records, at least some of the records that the respondent promised. These records indicated that there were other additional violations, serious violations. So one of those would be withdrawal of cash to make expenditures, which is expressly prohibited in the Political Reform Act for various reasons, including that it makes it difficult for us as the enforcement agency to track whether what this candidate or any candidate are using these funds for, right? Additionally, we had the respondent appear before us at our last meeting, and he indicated that he had filed all his paperwork. He has not filed all his paperwork.
That is correct.
There's no reason to assume that he was not aware of that filing obligation. He's run in 2 different elections, at least. He is a sitting public official. So for me, that is certainly something that I'm considering the fact that, he misled us as to what his filing status and outstanding filings were. I appreciate you walking us through how you've changed the different fine amounts. I think your explanation of the change for the Victorville, the violations related to the Victorville committee makes a lot of sense. It's my understanding that that change is consistent with our prior similar cases, as well as how we generally handle fining in these sorts of situations, right, of the 8 factors that we consider. So me personally, I'm in support of moving forward and adopting this default. But I want to open it up to the rest of the commissioners if they have any questions. Commissioner Baker?
I would move to approve. I think you've been more than patient. I think it is disappointing that there is a sitting public official that has had this response and that you've laid out very well the evidence for us. This commission has been more than patient and reasonable with the respondent. And I think it's even generous that the fines have been adjusted the way they have. So I do move to approve this default and also point out something that the chair mentioned in the prior presentation. Defaults take this staff a lot of time. And this is an example. This is a terrible expenditure of time that a public official has subjected public servants to in the name of transparency and accountability. This is a great example of how we can't make the respondents respond in a timely fashion. Maybe we'll address this a little later in the agenda. But I appreciate the time that was spent, that you gave us the opportunity after Mr. Ramos was here last month to push it down the line. I know that was something that you were not particularly recommending to us. And I am just disappointed that someone who's given that ability to come forward didn't meet what I think is an obligation on their part. So thank you for the work that you have done.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Thank you. I agree with Commissioner Baker's frustration, disappointment of Mr. Ramos' conduct. I think I finally understood one of the prongs about malicious or intended or whatever, because it's very rare that you find that kind of violation. I'm going to support the proposal with kind of hesitation, but I'm going to support it.
Commissioner Wilson?
No, I'd say my colleagues summarized, I think, the situation and some of the frustration that I think all of us are feeling. So I will support this this motion and move on from there. Just for clarification, I mean, you made it clear what the answer is, but for the benefit of the public, what is the process for collecting this fine, a fine that should be collected in the most expeditious way?
Would you like me to, I can answer if you? Well, what will happen is we will go through to perfect this judgment with the Superior Court, and then we will have a judgment that we can then enforce and assert liens and so forth. That's generally how the process will work.
And that's how it's been explained in the past. And then he will be personally liable for this fine, correct?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Baker?
Thank you. You mentioned there's a committee that you've repeatedly asked him to close. Is there an administrative termination process that is appropriate here?
Yes, I believe so. Well, it's you can administratively terminate if there's no activity within 12 months. He has done some filings recently on that, so that may have an impact that I'll let Executive Director West address if she knows better.
Sure, yes. Usually it's more for a committee that's defunct, that's not being used at all. We're unclear on why he is keeping this committee open, and since he was filing for the committee, that's not one that would generally qualify, but as we go through collections, that might become the case.
And you also mentioned July 31st, semi-annual was not filed. Are there commission-initiated, because this default doesn't cover that unless I'm missing a deal, are there any, without telling us what we're not supposed to know, because there's a firewall between the commission and enforcement for these purposes, but commission can initiate a complaint when there are violations that we are aware of.
That's correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Thank you. Follow up on Commissioner Wilson's question regarding payment and all. Is there a timeline where he will have to have paid the fine by?
No, it will take some time for us to get the matter through the Superior Court. That will take at least 60 days. Then we will have a judgment that we can enforce. And then it becomes like any other judgment that you try to enforce. You have to renew it, I believe, every 10 years. But, you know, if we will have lien ability and things of that nature. So if property is sold or he has lottery winnings or whatever it might be, there are different avenues potentially to collect on that judgment. But that's where we go from here.
Good luck.
Okay, well, before we make a motion, any public comment on this item? I see none in the room, but it sounds like we have a phone call. Go ahead.
Hello, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Hello, great morning, great afternoon, Chair, Commission, staff. This is Daniel Ramos, Mayor Pro Tem for the City of Adelanto. I just wanted to call in today. Unfortunately, I'm not able to be there in person. I do apologize. There's some current events going on in our county and our city right now that are just, you know, I cannot leave right now and be up there as much as I really wanted to be. First and foremost, I do just want to take a second. I know I have 3 minutes, so I'm going to try and move as quickly as possible. Did want to take a quick second and congratulate the commission on your achievement of your 50th anniversary. Amazing job. You know, I hope you guys continue to do the amazing work that you're doing. I am a little shocked and kind of just, you know, in awe on some of the remarks that Director Lindsay has made. I'm trying to categorize them as best as possible so I can address, you know, each one of them. In the matter of Victorville, he's stating that I didn't have the bank account that I had wasn't the bank account that I mentioned. That statement is absolutely incorrect and false. My question to Mr. Lindsay would be, if I didn't have a legal bank account with Bank of America, then how were the investigators able to subpoena all my records, my deposits, my withdrawals from Bank of America? All that stuff was sent to me in my packet that you guys sent me. I never got that information for you guys. You guys went out and got that information so for you to say that there wasn't a Bank of America account and that there was another bank, that's completely inaccurate, sir, with all due respect, because you guys.
Sure, and Mr. Ramos, I'm going to interrupt you for one moment so that the Enforcement Division Chief can respond if he feels appropriate. One thing I would note is I think when we're talking about the bank account, we're talking about for the 2020 committee as well, right?
Yes,
and it sounds like that was the one we were having
sir.
trouble getting information for, and then you recently provided us with those records. They conflicted with the information that you provided on your Form 410. And I personally am having a hard time taking your word at this point because you told us that all of your filings were in last meeting. You were standing here in front of us, confirmed that, and then we found out in the interim that they were not. So I'm inclined to obviously trust, my enforcement division and the years that they've spent investigating this. So if you could give us just one moment so Mr. Lindsay could respond.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so it's his 410 relating to his 2020, where committee that he disclosed an unknown account at Bank of America. We then tried to subpoena the records because he didn't give us a voluntary compliance. We did not receive any documents from that subpoena because Bank of America account didn't exist. So it was only after our last commission meeting where he said that he would provide the records. He said again, but it was for the first time. And then it was discovered by the Enforcement Division that there was no bank account at Bank of America, just as we had assumed since we were completely unsuccessful. And then we found out that it was really at Desert Community / Flagstar Bank.
And one thing I would note as a former prosecutor in the Enforcement Division, I can tell you that it's not an easy process getting a subpoena for these records and working with the bank, right? It takes a lot of man hours, takes a lot of focus on our part. So it's incredibly frustrating that we've had to devote man hours to getting this information because communications that have been provided to you were ignored, right? I assume that Enforcement Division staff reached out, asked for these records, you did not provide them. Then they had to pursue this subpoena, which involves not just the Enforcement Division, but also others in the FPPC. You know, someone, if they looked at some of these mistakes in a vacuum, could think they were just an honest mistake. But when you put them all together, they're just a clear disregard for the rule of law here that concerns me. So go ahead. What was your next point?
Thank you, Chair. And to that, you know, and again, you know, the statement, Mr. Lindsay, that he just made is again inaccurate. If we're talking about the 2020 committee, and again, to Mrs. Commissioner Ortiz's point, when I was there in person, she made it very clear that this charge was very serious. You guys stated, the investigator stated, that I did not have a bank account open for 2020. I, in fact, told you guys, yes, I 100% for a fact knew that I had a legal bank account with DCB, which is now Flagstar. Those are the documents that the investigator said they never had. I provided those documents immediately when I got back home. Immediately.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ramos. It would have been helpful for the people of California as well as the FPPC to have received that information far earlier. And the document that you filed, the Form 410, when you decided to run for office, that disclosed a different bank, right? So our Enforcement Division had no means of identifying where your bank account was. I would suggest moving on to your next point, unless commissioners have any other
Chair,
questions.
Well, Chair, I'd just like to point out that that's inaccurate. I don't understand where they're saying that the bank account that I reported is not the bank account. Now, if he's talking about that it was reported as DCB and then now it's Flagstar, then I can understand that might be the confusion, but I have nothing to do with that. When I opened up my bank account, it was DCB. The bank now is Flagstar. Investigator Director Lindsay also mentioned stuff in regards to my Facebook with mailers and stuff. There's assumptions. When I spoke to the investigator in regards to the mailers clearly state, and they're not posting these in the reports that they're giving you guys. I'm holding the mailer in my hand right now, and it says not authorized by a candidate or a committee controlled by a candidate, right? I think there's just a lot of assumptions, right? Same thing with the hats and the shirts. They were never mass produced. It was one hat and one shirt that my mother made for me. So a lot of these things that they're stating, they're assumptions and they're not facts. If they're saying that I'm responsible for the mailers, well, then why do the mailers say that if it's not authorized by a candidate or a committee? But
sure.
yet,
Well, two things on that point, Mr. Ramos,
by
and I'll just remind you, so you're at time,
Yes, sir.
but because, you know, the gravity of this matter, I want to give you the opportunity to, you know, raise your concerns here to the extent we can.
Thank you.
So first, in terms of facts, the Form 410 that's filed, the Statement of Organization, that has to disclose the bank where you have your single campaign bank account. It's my understanding that the Form 410 that you filed for your 2020 committee stated that the bank was Bank of America. Bank of America has not changed. It is still Bank of America. That form has not been amended to change the bank where your campaign, where your committee banks, right? And I'll just confirm this with Mr. Lindsay. Does it in fact say Bank of America on the Form 410?
It does, and I'm
Okay.
looking at it right now. I don't have the same pagination that you do, but I'm looking at it right now in the packet.
And that's for my 20. And you're saying that's for my 2020 committee that it says that?
That's, Mr. Lindsay, I'll let you
think that's
respond.
That is
Inaccurate,
correct.
sir.
That is not inaccurate. I'm looking at it right now.
Well, it's not necessary to litigate this any further. We can see the document. It says Bank of America. So that's fine. So your next point in terms of the mailings and other items, those are
Yeah,
not
you know,
being
and I just-
charged. Yeah, those are not being charged here as part of the default. There's other violations that are not being charged either, but are being considered for aggravating, and that could be that includes the cash withdrawals to make expenditures. You know, it states in our campaign training materials and our manuals that you cannot do that. It's one of the most serious violations of the act to take cash out of your campaign bank account to pay campaign-related expenditures. And that's for various reasons, like we talked about earlier, because it could open up potential personal use. It undermines record keeping. So That's very clear from the banking records that you provided our office, finally at this point. So you can go ahead, you could discuss the mailings if you'd like, but again, that's not being charged, right? So I don't think it's particularly helpful to you or us or the audience to further litigate that or the 410.
Understood. Appreciate it, Chair. Appreciate it for that. In closing, again, I'm not here. I would like to reiterate to the commission that, I'm not one last thing, in regards to my July 31st, I text our city clerk to just confirm that was sent off, because I do recall sending that off 100%. I was even in there, I think 3 days ago to City Hall to confirm that it was, and she did confirm. So if we could just double check on that, I'd appreciate that. But in closing, I'd like to reiterate that I'm not here to ask for no penalty or no fine. Do I deserve a fine? I'll be the first one to raise my hand and take accountability and say yes. What I want to be fined for, though, is for turning my statement in late. 100% guilty of that. What I'm not guilty of is any type of misappropriation of funds and any type of misuse of campaign funds. And that, to me, is the bigger picture for me to get my name cleared on. One thing that I was a little disappointed on that I do just want to close out with and bring the attention of the commission, that I was contacted by the investigators to settle at a $25,000 settlement, right? When I had some questions for Mr. Rose, he didn't have the answers, so he had to go track the answers down. He later came back and after offering me the settlement, he comes back, calls me, tell me that he forgot to let me know that if I agreed to the settlement, that they needed the $25,000 a few days before the commission hearing, which would have given me about 2.5 weeks to come up with $25,000. I didn't really feel right about that. I felt like I was being cornered, almost strong-armed, because I literally stood in front of that commission, last month and was asked, is there any money? Is there, any campaign raising, any funds raising? And I said no. So, there was no, I wasn't able to come up with any type of payment plan, which I wish I would have been, I would have been able to potentially, talk to the investigators about. But the offer was $25,000 as a settlement, and I needed to have it within 2.5 weeks before the commission hearing. So, again, I'm at the mercy of this commission. I've done, everything that I feel I could possibly do to show that a lot of these, allegations.
Mr. Ramos, I'll remind you your past times. If you could wrap it up, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Again, I would ask the commission to please consider a lesser amount, $10,000, $15,000, something that I could potentially, really come up with and pay as quickly as possible. But again, your decision, I will take, and just, I want to move forward with this and continue trying my best to be, a great leader for my constituents, my city, my county, and anybody else that I come across. Appreciate the time.
Thank you for your comment. Mr. Lindsay?
I don't know if the commission wants me to address any of the discussion.
I don't think that's necessary. Does any? Okay. Do I have a motion? Okay. Excellent. Then I'll second that. Ms. Linker? Oh, we have additional public comment. Okay, go ahead. Sure. Go ahead.
Hello, this is Brendan O'Brien. Commissioners, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Real quickly, my name is Brendan O'Brien. I'm a business owner, and I run a community nonprofit and own the Route 66 Museum, California Route 66 Museum here in Victorville. I'm here on this call today to provide a character reference for Daniel Ramos. I've known him for about 3 years now, and I've known him to be consistently demonstrating a commitment to performing his community role as a leader and an elected official. Every dealing that I've had with him, he's shown extreme integrity. He's shown a vision for what he wants to accomplish for his constituents. And on a professional level, some of the comments that I've heard on this call today, I'm completely unaware of. I've never seen any type of transactions or any transactions that were questionable. And in my role, I'm working with real estate transactions and have a extreme reliance on showing complete transparency on any fiduciary matter. I understand that the disparaging potential that it could look as if there is any question. And I would like to suggest, and this is something that just kind of came to my mind, my organization has several accountants that do significant forensic analysis. We could help Mr. Ramos provide any type of documentation moving forward to help resolve any type of issue here. It has been, we appreciate some of the work, all the work that Daniel Ramos is doing in his community, and see him as a strong business individual as well. And so we'd like to offer any support we can to help provide clarity and transparency for financial records, and work as kind of a mediator with your team. We do see Daniel Ramos as a very, very strong, prominent individual in the community, and would like to see him continue supporting and serving constituents that he's been elected to do. And you can contact me after the call if you have any further questions. Again, I'll make that public or available to the commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Do we have any additional public comment? Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, and thank you for taking my call. My name is Joy Jeanette, and I come across Mr. Ramos as he volunteers within the community of Atlanta and the High Desert. That's how I come to know him. Being a Navy veteran and going through 3 combat tours, this is very important because, we have the freedom of having this call today, are the things that we're able to do because of our veterans, and I'm sure you know that, given us our freedoms. He's a single parent of a very young man, a young son, that is absolutely outstanding. Very, he helps people. He even prays at the meetings, the young boy. He's very well taken care of by his daddy. And as an outstanding citizen, he helped us through the COVID areas. And as you know, the COVID areas was most confusing, not only for our city, but for our state and the whole world. Everything seemed to be at a standstill, and things that were most important during that time, prior to that time, I should say, no longer existed. And things like nothing existed that did before. And all this seemed to happen beginning at that time, according to what I understand. I may be wrong, but I believe that to be true. Mr. Ramos has never had any criminal background. Served honorably, as I said, in the U.S. Navy. 3 combat tours. We need to correct, there seems to be a lot of confusion on this banking. From my understanding, that the fine was up because of the misunderstanding with the banking. Like Mr. Ramos just said, as I heard, that he started with Bank of America and then he switched to Flagstar, which was Desert Community Bank prior to that. They just changed their name. And I think that needs to be really looked at closer before we put these kind of fines on anybody. Do you know the hardship that this is going to be on a man that is trying so hard to raise his son and to be that wonderful community volunteer, which he is? He spent, I would say, hundreds and hundreds of hours volunteering. He leads the city as the mayor pro tem in a magnificent way. Everywhere he goes, he's highly respected. So, as he said, he's negligent in filing these forms in a timely manner. He agrees to that, and I can see that also. But also, the fine is way outrageous. This is going to put a complete hardship upon him. He's trained to raise his little boy, and as an outstanding citizen, which the little guy is, he's just, I think he's 5 or 6 years old now. And you need to consider all these things. This needs to be considered. And I thank you for taking my perspective on this. You guys do a great job up there. we really appreciate all the diligence and work that you do. And but I think this has to this fine is not in consideration of what the penalty should be. But that's just my perspective. Thank you again for taking my call, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for that additional background. Of course, we thank Mr. Ramos and other veterans for their service. And it's good to hear that, in your opinion, he's been a successful, diligent public official. But the realities are the realities of what we've discussed here today. So any additional public comment? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello. Hi.
Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for taking my call, Commission. My name is Diana Esmeralda, and I am a resident of Adelanto. The person that spoke before me is the city council person that campaigned with Mr. Ramos in 2020. So I just want to inform the commission of that. I was witness to many of these issues firsthand that happened in 2020 because I also ran for city council. And Mr. Ramos, in his position as planning commissioner to the mayor, received many more benefits to his campaign specifically than I could have ever organized and promoted and done myself. I can't afford $150,000 for Paul Pierce. I can't even afford 250 backpacks. You know, the disrespect that Mr. Ramos and the two previous callers before me have shown to this commission is just a glimmer of what is actually happening in city council meetings. They are in charge of nonprofits that gain city money. It's just amazing. And I think that Mr. Ramos needs to be charged to the full extent of the law, and also be held to the verification on Part 3 of the California Form 410, where it says, I have used all reasonable diligence in preparing this statement, and to the best of my knowledge, the information contained herein is true and complete. I certify under penalty of perjury under the law of the state of California that the foregoing is true and correct. Mr. Ramos needs to be held to those words on these forms. They're not just words. They are here to keep these politicians in line and stop harming the public. Please take him off the ballot, or do what you can do. Do not lower his campaign, the fines, because he'll easily be able to, through this campaign, funnel and launder those campaign dollars to pay the fines. Thank you so much for hearing me. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for your comments. I also suspect that it was you who submitted a written comment as well. So if the public would like to take a look at that written comment, they can review that as well. Do we have additional public comment? Yes, we do. Go ahead.
Good evening, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
My name is Miguel Soto. I'm a resident of Adelanto. I want to first congratulate the FPPC for their 50th anniversary. And I want to speak about transparency and trust. At the heart of our democracy is transparency and trust. Trust in our leaders, trust in our institutions, and trust in the process that governs our daily lives. This trust is fragile. It can be built over years of dedication and service, but it can be shattered in a moment by lack of transparency. Because without transparency, there can be no trust. And without trust, our democracy falters. This is why the Fair Political Practice Commission was created. It's not just a regulatory body. It is a guardian of our trust. It stands as a beacon of accountability, reminding us that no one is above the law, and that every public official is here to serve the people, not their interests. The FPPC is not an enemy of public officials. It is a friend to every citizen who believes in democracy, fairness, and justice. The FPPC was established to ensure that integrity is not just a word, but a practice, a standard that every public official must uphold. It was created to protect us from the shadows of secrecy and ensure that every action taken in the name of the public is done in the light of day. We cannot turn a blind eye when our leaders fail to disclose, fail to be open, and fail to be honest. We must demand transparency at every level of government. Let us remember that our city, our community, deserves leaders who are transparent, accountable, and who understand that they are here to serve, not to rule. Let us continue to embrace transparency, welcome scrutiny, and lead by example. Because in doing so, we honor the trust that people have placed in us as elected or appointed officials. And there's no greater honor than serving with integrity. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Soto. Any additional public comment? Hearing and seeing none. We already have a motion. It's been seconded. Ms. Linker?
Commissioner Baker?
Aye.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Chair Silver?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Okay, now we're going to move on to several pre-notice defaults that we have on the calendar. That would be items 8 through 11. These are just for notice purposes. Do any commissioners have any questions on these pre-notice defaults? Do we have any public comment on any of these items? Yes, we do. Go ahead, please. We have public comment on items 8 through 11.
Yes, Commissioners, I have a comment on number 9.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm pleased that the FPP's investigation into Steve Grash's violation of the FPPC rules during the 2018 and 22 election cycles has finally come to fruition.
And before you go
His
any further,
history in
sir,
running for-
sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
My apologies. We're a quasi-judicial body, so I want to make sure that you're not providing us with any detailed information related to the violations here to avoid us being prejudiced and not being able to move forward with this at a later date. So please avoid any information like that. You can go on.
You're asking me to avoid a history of his political involvement?
Any discussion of the violations here. So if possible, I think it'd be productive just to accept your comment that you appreciate that we are pursuing this. And if we could leave it at that, just to avoid potential prejudice of the commissioners.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think his history in running for political seats reveals he's no novice to the process, and his failures as documented by the FPPC demonstrate his violations are flagrant and habitual, and there should be no leniency given to his fines. That's my comment.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you calling in. Any additional public comment? Hearing and seeing none, I'm going to move on. We don't need to take any actions on these items. So we're going to move on to the general items, 12 through 15. I'm going to let Chief Lindsay finally leave his seat, and we're going to have Senior Commission Counsel John Pfizer come join us to discuss amendments to Regulation 18703, Public Generally Exception to Conflict of Interest Provision. I should say prohibition. Good afternoon, Mr. Pfizer.
Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners.
And as this is pre-notice, I'm just going to let you begin your presentation.
Sure.
And if any commissioners have any questions, please chime in.
Okay, under the Political Reform Act, a public official is prohibited from making, participating in making, or attempting to influence a governmental decision if it is reasonably foreseeable that the decision will have a material financial effect on the official's financial interest, distinguishable from its effect on the public generally. Regulation 18703 sets forth the rules for applying the public generally exception. Subdivision A provides a two-part test to establish if the effect of a decision on an official's financial interest is indistinguishable from the effect on the public generally. The first part of the test is to determine if a significant segment is affected. And the second part is to ask if the effect on the official's financial interest is not unique compared to the effect on the significant segment. The subject of these proposed amendments is Regulation 18703 Subdivision E, which provides special circumstances under which the public generally exception applies to certain decisions that broadly apply to a large portion of the public. Specifically, the proposed revisions would enable the public generally exception to be applied to circumstances where the governmental decision at issue is made by a government entity that manages an airport or harbor. The existing public generally exception applies only if the governmental decision affects 25% of either all businesses or nonprofit entities, all real property, commercial real property or residential property, or all individuals in the official's jurisdiction. An official's jurisdiction generally includes the entire geographic location in which the agency has jurisdiction, typically a city, county, or an agency with larger multi-county boundaries. But identifying a significant segment within the entire geographic location of an official's jurisdiction does not work for an airport or harbor because an official's authority is specific to the management of the infrastructure and the people using it. And an official's duties do not necessarily extend to the entire city, county, or multi-county area. The proposed revisions would resolve this by enabling the identification of a significant segment among the people who use the infrastructure. So for instance, under the proposed revisions, the public generally exception will apply to a city harbor district if the decision affects all people with a licensed boat slip from the harbor district, even if the number of people with a licensed boat slip is less than 25% of the business entities or individuals within the city, most of whom do not use the harbor. In these circumstances, the affected significant segment should be identified among people within the government entity's specific jurisdiction, provided the governmental decision at issue affects all permit, license, or leaseholders within the government entity in a similar manner. And the only interests affected by the decisions result from the official's permit, license, or other use entitlement from the government entity. There are two recent advice letters that provide some factual context for application of the proposed amendments. In one, staff advised the director of an airport district who leased hangar space for his airplane from the district not to participate in decisions involving hangar improvements and a rate study to consider updates to hangar rental fees. In this case, the general rule of the public generally exception did not apply because the district's jurisdiction extended to multiple counties, well beyond the grounds of the airport itself. And thus the decisions regarding the hangars would not affect at least 25% of the segments provided in Regulation 18703 Subdivision A. Also, the special circumstances for public services did not apply because the decision did not set or adjust the rate for public service. The public general exception, however, would apply under these proposed amendments to the regulation today. And another letter involved two members of a harbor commission who paid slip permitting fees to keep their boats in a city harbor. The general rule in Regulation 18703 Subdivision A did not apply for the same reason as in the prior airplane hangar case. In this one, staff advised officials, however, that they could participate in the decisions to adjust permit fees due to the special circumstances exception for public services and utilities under Regulation 18703 Subdivision E1. The exception for public services and utilities applied in this circumstance because the decision involved an equal or proportional adjustment in fees. If the decision had not involved the adjustment of fees, such as in the airplane hangar case, the harbor commissioners would not have been able to take part in the decisions under Regulation 18703, even if the decision similarly affected all permits issued by the Harbor Commission. It should be noted that Government Code Section 1090 does not draw a distinction in the same circumstance based on the nature of the decision. So, for instance, if the official's rental of hangar space at a municipal airport is a non-interest under Section 1090, so the Section 1090 prohibitions would not apply. Staff's proposed amendments would apply the public generally exception uniformly in this narrow situation without distinguishing rate-setting decisions from other decisions. The proposed amendments would enable the application of the public generally exception in specific circumstances involving the government entities that manage an airport or harbor. These amendments would be consistent with the purpose of the public generally provision in the statute and would harmonize the Act with Section 1090 in this narrow circumstance. More generally speaking, Regulation 18703 and these proposed amendments implement the term public generally as stated in Government Code Section 87103. The Commission is authorized by law to make these amendments pursuant to Government Code Sections 83111 and 83112. That is a summary of the proposed amendments. I now pause for any questions or comments.
Excellent. Thank you for your presentation. I just want to compliment the legal division on how they handled this issue, right? Sounded like you had two different advice letters that came in. You could have just created new law potentially via these advice letters, stretched an exception that's already in regulation. But instead, what you did is you identified this issue, right? And you brought back a regulation to specifically make it clear how it should be handled in a way that's, I think, practical, common sense, and the public would agree with, right? We want these sorts of experts, stakeholders to be able to participate on these sorts of bodies. Obviously, we don't want them to participate in any self-interested transactions. And this is a way that allows us to keep those sort of officials accountable, right? While still allowing for their expertise to be on these boards. So again, just wanted to compliment the legal division on the way that they handled this through the regulatory process. Any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Baker?
Thank you. I was surprised this wasn't already dealt with, so I'm glad that you are bringing this forward in the way that the chair has described. And when I first read the memo, I thought, okay, this all makes sense. A couple of areas have come to mind that I just want to be sure of. Because I think ultimately this will allow more participation from leaders who are affected by their decision than less. And I'm kind of wondering, if we do this, let's say it's a local airport and there's a decision that's made by the airport governing board, but the public that's affected by it now isn't, how are they considered in this analysis? So for example, if it is, you're going to rent a hangar at an airport, and maybe the proposal is to make improvements to it, but not pass the cost on to the people who are renting the hangar, but to spread it out and have the public pay for it, people who don't have a hangar. To me, that is something I'd be like, gosh, that maybe doesn't sound right, that at least there's not some potential consideration of the public and being part of that 25% segment. So that's the scenario I'm thinking of, is that it seems this could potentially allow an airport board or harbor person who has a permit or has a hangar or gets the benefit of that service to make a decision and not have a conflict of interest, but the public's going to end up paying for it. Maybe they don't. I'm given a very specific scenario, and I don't know that you can address that, and I don't have edits that I can make to how we do that, but I am concerned about that. Can you comment at all on how that specific hypothetical might play out, or any ideas in response?
Sure. So could you
Yeah.
restate that a little bit?
So let's say the hypothetical is, again, it's a broader scenario where If we don't change this, it's possible that an airport board person wouldn't be able to participate in a decision because there's a conflict of interest. They might benefit from it. Let's say I'm on an airport board and I rent hangar space because I fly an airplane. And we're voting on making improvements to the hangar space or something that's going to cost money. But the proposal we have is that that won't be passed on to the people who rent the space. It's going to be passed on to the public that doesn't have a permit, isn't renting space, but they are in the surrounding area of the airport. You know, in my town nearby, Livermore has a municipal airport. There's a municipal airport board, and maybe the citizens of Livermore would end up having to pay for it. And the appointed or elected official on the airport board gets the benefit of something, but gets to make a decision that puts the cost onto other people who were not part of the conflict of interest math, that 25%. So that's a really specific scenario, but where I'm going to is what are some potential implications if we are allowing this public generally exception to effectively be expanded to individuals that then could put a cost on the public they wouldn't be accounted, have as much say on.
Right.
It's the best I can do on giving that scenario.
No, I understand.
Hopefully I'm not trying to twist something that's too unique. I could totally see that happening.
Yeah, I think that we need to be a little more specific with what we mean by broadly available permits. And I think if we were more specific about that, and it's something that we have thought of, and I do have specific language that I could share with you if we'd like right now, because it's just a discussion. We're having a discussion trying to get this correct. And the whole idea is not to make it overly broad and not account for all the circumstances like this one that you mentioned. So
If chairs are right, I welcome that. Just
Absolutely.
knowing it better, this is the time to tuss it
Sure.
out.
It's not too complicated. So in subdivision 8A, which we're talking about, if you remove broadly available permits and you just say the decision affects permits, licenses, or other use entitlements granted by the government entity in a similar manner that are broadly available to all others similarly situated and are provided on substantially the same terms as any other recipient. So we're talking about similarly situated people and it would account for the concern that you're raising.
Maybe. It might. I'm going to offer that for pre-notice contemplation from the team of very smart people in there. It's just those scenarios where this might allow for some, what might be appearance of either self-dealing or otherwise that we normally wouldn't want to have. And I'm sorry I'm not coming up with more solutions. It can be my homework.
No, that's a great point. Ms. West?
Yeah, and I think that when legal division was coming up with this, they were looking at these harbor districts, these airport districts that don't really have the authority that we know of that they could tax outside of their jurisdiction. So pushing a cost on outside of the people that they regulate, it would be like saying a city council could then push the cost onto another city. So I think that maybe for the adoption, we also look at what the authority of these entities is to know if those decisions would be broader.
Thank you. And if I may, Mr. Chair, I really am thinking of a very practical application of, again, an airport board is going to vote on, hey, you can expand the hours that your noisy airplane can fly. And even though it's going to benefit me, maybe I serve on the board and that means I get to fly it more and I get some kind of potentially material financial impact. And the public isn't necessarily paying for it, but they don't get to weigh in as much. I think you get where I'm going with this, is that if you can sort of tuss out those scenarios where this might allow for participation in decisions that an insular group can best benefit from in ways that we may not intend and actually want them to be conflicted out from. Thank you.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And whenever you're adopting a new regulation, you always kind of want to try to identify the loophole ahead of time. So I'm glad we're considering this at this juncture. Two other items to note here. One, I know that we've already conferred with the Special Districts Association on this, which I think is great. I think they're an excellent stakeholder to confer with on something like this. It's really in the weeds. And then I also had an ex parte conversation to disclose with Nick Sanders, a member of CPAA, generally on this regulation. Any other comments? Okay. Any public comment on this item? Hearing and seeing none? Oh, go ahead.
Now, you met with every group has an organization. Is there an Airport and Harbors Association, or is that tied into the special district?
There is not, and as a matter of fact, we considered using special district as sort of in the title of this and applying to special districts, but it turns out that the two letters we're talking about didn't involve special districts, and we're not really sure of the whole world of what entities are involved. And so that's why we're referring to government entities that manage airports or harbors. It could be part of a city, part of a county. So and not just special districts. So,
So one other idea, I suspect that before the two officials that solicited advice from us, before they solicited that advice, I assume they reached out to whoever the general counsel is for that district. Perhaps we want to reach out to those specific jurisdictions, to those officials, to see if they have any feedback on the regulation.
Sure. Yes.
And I don't have any specific information. This is more just through casual conversation. So I don't know the name of the association, but I think there is an entity that deals with airports and harbors. I don't know the name of it, but I could probably find out. But I think there is such an entity.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Baker?
And just to Commissioner Wilson's good point, they may be able to point you in the direction, the Bar Pilots Association. These are the ones who drive the big tankers into a big harbor bay like San Francisco. And they may be able to point you in the direction. And then there's also some local, I've mentioned Livermore Municipal Airport because that's my own neighborhood, but there might be some local, taken somewhat of random, of jurisdictions that have general counsel and otherwise. And finally, if you reach out to Cal Cities, if they keep a database on what are their city jurisdictions that have municipal airports in them that might, or harbors that see how these issues play out in the community, that might be it as well. I defer to you on if you determine that that's worth your time. Just want to throw that out there. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. I think those are all great ideas. Anything else before we move on? Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Fizer.
All right. Thank you.
And now we have a legislative update from Senior FPPC Legislative Counsel, Lindsay Nakano. Good afternoon, Ms. Nakano.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. All right, the legislature has adjourned for the 2023-2024 legislative session. They'll return for a one-day organizational session after the election on December 2nd, and will reconvene full-time in early January. Before I go over updates on the new bills signed by the governor since last month, I'll highlight that I'll be presenting legislation ideas for next year at the November Commission meeting for the Commission's consideration. On to updates. 16 FPPC-related bills passed in the legislature this year. So far, 7 of them have been signed by the governor. All of the bills signed so far will be effective starting January 1st, 2025. For the remaining 9 bills, the governor has until the end of this month to make his decision.
And how many FPPC-sponsored bills were signed by the governor or are on the governor's desk?
Look at my report.
Well, while Lindsay's, Ms. Nakano is looking that up, one note that I wanted to share with the public is the passage of AB, so Assembly Bill 1170, which was introduced by Assemblymember Valencia. And this is an electronic filing bill that we've been working on for several years that would require high-level officials to use our e-filing system, which has numerous benefits to it in terms of transparency and efficiency and cost. So I'm very excited about that. And one thing that I wanted to share with the public is we're already being proactive in terms of reaching out to filing officials and stakeholders to make sure that those who are now required to use our e-filing system understand how to use it. So if you have any questions about that, I encourage you to reach out to us directly and also look out for the trainings and engagements that we plan on doing so that we can have an excellent implementation of this important piece of legislation.
Great, thank you for that. The commission has 4 sponsored bills that were passed by the legislature, and all 4 of those are among those that have been signed by the governor.
Excellent. You can go ahead, Ms. Nakano.
Thank you. As the chair mentioned, AB 1170 is among the signed bills. And since the chair provided a summary of that one, I'll move on. AB 2355 by Assembly Members Carrillo and Cervantes also passed and was signed by the governor. The bill requires committees that create or originally distribute campaign ads that were generated or substantially altered with artificial intelligence to include a disclaimer on the advertisement. As we've discussed in previous meetings, commission staff do have concerns over whether the new requirement can be effectively enforced. Staff have been and will continue to research whether effective tools exist to assist in enforcement. AB 2573 by Assemblymember Mike Fong also passed. That bill clarifies that the services of a fellow provided by certain organizations do not constitute a gift to a state officer under the PRA. Those organizations are the Asian Pacific Islander Capital Association, California Legislative Black Staff Association, the Capital LGBTQ Association, and the California Latino Capital Association Foundation. AB 2631, also by Assemblymember Mike Fong, was signed by the governor. It codifies the FPPC Local Ethics Training Program in statute, ensuring that that program remains a permanent resource for local officials. And last of the signed bills, SB 1027 by Senator Menjivar. The bill requires redaction of certain sensitive bank account information included on statements of organization from copies of those statements provided to the public. The remaining 9 bills under consideration by the governor are listed in the legislation report. Are there any comments on the signed bills before I move on to a brief update on that?
My only comment is thank you. Excellent work, Ms. Nakano. I've been following a lot of these bills since I was ethics counsel at the Assembly, and for whatever reason, there was difficulty getting them through. And you did an excellent job ushering us through the process and getting each one of these sponsored bills through. So thank you. Any other comments from commissioners?
Thank you. And a big thanks to this commission also for their feedback and support through the process. And thank you also to staff for their assistance. Couldn't do it without them. It's a team effort. I wanted to make one comment on 2 of the bills that are on the governor's desk now, SB 1181 and SB 1243. These are the bills that amend Section 84308 relating to contribution limits and recusal requirements for agency officials. I want to comment since there was a pretty extensive discussion at previous meetings. Both of those bills were amended to resolve inconsistencies and conflicts between the bills. Some of the main changes made by both bills taken together include 1, increasing the contribution limit from $250 to $500. There was a lot of discussion during the year about what the appropriate amount was, and they landed on $500. 2, making several new exemptions. Those exemptions are listed in the legislation report. I can go over them if you'd like. 3, expanding the provisions allowing an official to return an improper contribution or cure a violation within a specific time period. And 4, prohibiting contributions from agents during the proceeding and for 12 months after the final decision, and providing that agent contributions are not subject to the aggregation rules. Because the bills were written to resolve conflicts between them both, the governor may choose to sign both bills or either or neither. So that concludes my update, but happy to answer any questions.
Well, I have 2 comments, but before, I don't want to hog the mic. Do any other commissioners have any comments or questions? Okay. Number 1, I just wanted to recognize a few different bills, one of which you mentioned related to artificial intelligence in elections that the governor signed. I want to thank the legislature and the governor for paying such close attention to this very important issue. I really think it's the issue of our time, how government is going to regulate and leverage these types of technologies, these emerging technologies. So I'm glad we're getting ahead of the rest of the states in the United States in regulating this. With that said, we do have our concerns in terms of identifying in the context of disclaimers, identifying when a communication is generated or modified. And that's something that I'm sure that we're going to look at diligently and closely as we move forward. But generally, I'm happy that this is something that California is focused on. Second, I just want to recognize Senator Steve Glazer, who joined us at our 50th anniversary event last week. He has been a consistent champion for transparency, for accountability for public officials, and for the FPPC. And he's unfortunately going to be leaving us after this session. And I just want to thank you for his support and his office's support through my short term as chair. And I'll also thank him on behalf of previous chairs because I'm sure they'd have the same words of appreciation to share. So thank you again, Senator Glazer. Any other comment from commissioners? Commissioner Baker?
I just want to thank you also for the work this year. We gave you a lot of go back and do this, see if you can extract this or that, not easy provision or accommodation from legislators, which is not an easy thing to do. And thank you. Thank Senator Glazer for his collaboration prior to Chair Silver joining the commission and since. And then also Assemblymember Blakespear came to the program and they both stayed the whole time, which was over 3 or 4 hours.
Just a quick, that was Assemblymember Pellerin. But
Thank you.
nonetheless, Ms. Blakespear deserves thanks.
Thank
as
you.
well.
We're grateful for Ms. Blakespear, Assemblymember Blakespear. And then I was looking at the Blakespear bill in front of me. I did have some questions about the looking ahead, but I'll wait till we get to that point. And thank you, Assemblymember Pellerin, for being there for several hours. So thank you.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes, I want to, also commend Senator Glazer. He's always been someone who supported the commission and transparency. And also thank you for the outstanding job that you've done as our legislative counsel and our gain as the legislature's loss, since that was your prior employer. So thank you.
I think I'm going to join all my commissioners, my fellow commissioners, in thanking you for the great job. This is hard. This is a hard job trying to deal with Assembly or Senate members.
So I guess the next item to touch on is our plan moving forward in terms of legislation for the next session. Do you have any prepared remarks on that, or should we move on to the questions that Commissioner Baker had first?
Just look forward to an update and presentation in November. But if there's any comments, feedback right now, happy to take that.
Commissioner Baker?
You're generous to allow a preview. Just, I know there were 2 measures that we cared a lot about, the lobbying audits and lobbying fee. And if we, I'll be really looking forward in November to your recommendations on what maybe we can do going forward on that issue. It still remains not only who might be potential legislative champions, colleagues that we can work with, but how that might shape out so that we continue to try to chip away at that problem. The disclosure, the Ben Allen bill, disclosure of payments for elected official travel, that also is a fairly late one. And if we need to revisit that one, I welcome your recommendations. And then today's public comment raised an issue that I think in my tenure on the commission, it's come up a few times regarding when is the public use of resources for educating in a mailer to constituents, what are the rules and cross the line to prohibited activity. And I'm reliving things. I'm having a little bit of deja vu because I'm sure I asked the question in prior years. We're getting legislation ready or at least a briefing on it. I won't request the briefing, but if you see that there is anything in legislation that ties our hands to make any improvements we might want to make on making that line more stark or addressing potential abuses or the appearance of that the public may have, that's just one of those topics that I would welcome revisiting, knowing that the team won't necessarily have it all figured out by November. That's the topic. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Any public comment on legislative update? Before we move on, Commissioner Wilson?
Drag this out too much. Don't want to drag this out too much, but I know you noted that AB 2631 was approved by the governor in chapter dealing with local ethics training programs. And I'm assuming that part of that, the implementation of this legislation, will ensure that the local entities connect with, the FPPC for any training that they're going to be doing pursuant to this bill. I know that would be the natural process, but I think it's important for local entities to rely on the FPPC's expertise.
Thank you, yeah. Our legal division is very good with outreach and education, and I'm sure they'll be following up regarding this bill as well as the others.
And the last thing to mention is I just wanted to thank both the Assembly Elections Committee as well as the Senate Elections Committee for presenting us with a resolution celebrating our agency's 50th anniversary. So I'd like to thank Assemblymember Pellerin and Assemblymember Lackey, the Vice Chair, and Senator Blake Spear, and I believe it's Senator Wynn, am I correct? Is that the Vice Chair of Senate Elections? Okay. I'd like to thank them again for doing that unprompted, or at least unprompted for me. I had no idea it was coming until the day of. So thank you again for that. It's a great honor to receive that resolution and to be the helm of this agency as it celebrates its 50th anniversary. So let's move on to our next item, which is going to be executive staff reports. Let's start with Mr. Lindsay.
Hello again, James Lindsay, Enforcement Chief. Normally, I probably would have submitted this particular report for the most part, but since I'm here and I think there's some comment, we, as you can see from the report, we are experiencing an uptick in complaints now, and that continues to rise this month as well. But we have been able to manage to keep our case numbers stagnant, even with the increased number of complaints, and we're hopeful that we will be able to continue to do that. We have a good number of streamlines done as well, and I guess the one thing I would point out is that we've got running kind of through the gamut in terms of time. We do have a good number of older cases that have been resolved through the program, but we also have a good number of newer cases as well. So it's a good reminder that we are working all the cases, not just the older ones. We're trying to resolve cases that are newer as well. And I think that the report shows that we are working cases where we can and getting resolutions where respondents are responsive and willing to engage with us.
Yeah, and I don't have to tell you, Mr. Lindsay, there's a lot of considerations to balance as enforcement chief. I think you're doing an excellent job balancing all those different considerations, whether it's age of a case, public harm, all those different items there. So I think it's worth highlighting that it's impressive that our cases, our open cases, are not going up, given that we're in September right now and we have an election in less than 2 months. So that's something to point out. Do any other commissioners have questions? Commissioner Baker?
If colleagues don't have them, I had two that come out, less out of the statistical report, thank you, more out of some feedback from the 50th anniversary program that may be something we can cover in a future commission. So hopefully this is the right spot to do it, but I wanted to see if you had any thoughts. One of the, well, there was praise for both the legal team and the enforcement team for the work they're making, but one of the critiques, which I've heard before coming on the commission and since, was a scenario where there's a complaint that's filed, the respondent may have quite some time of radio silence, and maybe they provide information, they don't hear anything for quite some time. Maybe staffing changes happen here, which can't always be helped, starts the process a little bit over, re-educating. And basically they got to, a lot of time goes by, and then right very close to maybe it's a statute of limitations, most likely, the FPPC reaches out and says, hey, we've got a tolling agreement, we need you to sign it. If you don't, we're going to probable cause. And that was, I think, in one of the first panels, presented. I wondered if you had any, thoughts on that critique, and if one possible thing that we can request of you or statistics, if it does not require hiring someone just to track the statistics, is how frequently we are reaching out for tolling agreements. Like, let's say, can you comment on that at all?
Yes, I can. Thank you for the question. I will start by saying I think that comment was overstated.
Okay.
It may have been true 2-3 years ago. I'm not sure. We do engage in tolling agreements still. It's no secret that we have still a lot of cases, a lot of older cases. Occasionally, we do need tolling agreements. It's not what I would consider a statistically significant percentage of our cases. We definitely are not reaching out to people just before the statute of limitations for the first time in a long time, demanding that they sign a tolling agreement, or that we're going to go to probable cause, or that you've got 7 days to sign a mainline stipulation, or we're going to do something different. That has not been my experience at all over the year that I've been enforcement chief. We do have scenarios where we would like to get to cases faster than we do. Sometimes be honest about that. We do have some older cases, but we are moving on those cases more rapidly than what was sort of intimated at times at that in that presentation.
Is it fair then you have a sense of what it was like, I guess you mentioned 2, 3, 4 years ago, where that might have been more prevalent? Is this is that based on any review you've done or analysis?
I didn't specifically review anything relating to tolling agreements, but I have been able to see historically over the last couple of years where we are in terms of the volume of cases that are, say, in that 4 or 5 year period versus where we are with that now.
Sure.
For instance, if we look at on page 4 of the report, you'll see that older cases are getting pretty low for the most part. We do have a pretty good number still of 2020 cases, but we're resolving several of those today. We've resolved several others of them that aren't in this report. That number is going to go down quite a bit, I think, in our next report. We're getting very close to getting done with, and that's the same with 2019 cases as well. We just don't have that many of those anymore. We are effectively moving almost all of our 2018 through 2020 cases.
That's helpful. I guess I will, there's a short time for me that remains in the commission. And so it would be a question that I know I would bring up in the future is just tell us, can you be informing the commission perhaps during your quarterly update on how frequently did you have to see that sort of tolling situation, realizing that sometimes they're necessary, sometimes cases haven't been given to this commission until pretty close to potential statute of limitations. So it's beyond out of the team's hands to do that. I would welcome that information in the future. I'll leave to you how much of a burden that may be. I hope it's not much of one, and so that we can be just a little bit grounded as we look forward and potentially hear that complaint again based on prior experience. The only other question I had, and again, I'll look forward to your recommendations on it, that didn't come up out of the 50th anniversary, but because we have our own guidelines on our own team, enforcement division on milestones that you need to reach, how much the FEPC has put deadlines on respondents in which to respond. Just similar to a court. I mean, when a complaint's been filed, you have a certain amount of time before you got to take some kind of action, even if it is to request a continuance. Can you comment on if that is something that we could make more robust, and is it useful?
I think we can make it more robust as we work through our case volume. I think what happens when you are somewhat overwhelmed with case numbers is that you get to certain things and you ask people to do things, but you have so many other things to do that you sort of can let a non-responsive individual slide for a while. We are endeavoring to not allow that as much. And that goes through a lot of different processes, settlement being one of them. We have general standards as to how long we give people to respond to a settlement offer. There are times when I think that amount of time could be shortened up a little bit. Doesn't seem that complicated sometimes to decide whether or not you want to pay, certainly in the streamlined scenario. But, we're dealing with a lot of different people with a lot of different abilities to pay and so forth. So we generally have standards that allow people to think about settlements for 3-4 weeks. And we don't tend to push too much on that unless there's a particular reason to do so. But these processes take a long time, especially when people aren't responsive and whatnot. There's a lot of things that we have to do, and that causes a lot of delays.
Yeah, but it's sometimes forgotten that sometimes delays are because of the respondent and less on our team. But I appreciate that is also something that you consider and look at, and perhaps in a future report you might address. We've been trying to tighten that up where we see appropriate, and it's just setting whatever standards, even if they're informal internally, are helpful from your leadership. I don't know that we need to be getting into the micromanagement of what those deadlines are. That's your area of expertise, but I appreciate the continued updates on it. And if you ever have recommendations to us on what we can do, we will take them. Thank you,
Thank
colleagues.
you so much.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yeah, just in addition to Commissioner Baker's questions, I think it's important to look at some of what's happened historically in context. The streamlining process, I think, has expedited the process. When I first came on the commission, that wasn't fully implemented. And if we're going to look back over time, I think it's important for us to say, okay, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, what was our population? What was our staffing? And do we have enough staff? I mean, that's the bottom line. Someone can say, well, that needs to be done more efficiently. It needs to be done more expeditiously. But I think we also need to be upfront in terms of, do we need more staffing? And if we need more staffing, then we should go to the legislature and say, we need additional funding. Go to the governor and say we need additional funding. Because if we don't have enough staff to meet our needs, it's very easy for someone to say 2 years from now, well, you didn't take care of that in an expeditious manner. So I don't know if we have enough staffing, but that was one of the questions I had when I first joined the commission, that there are over close to 500 cities, numerous special districts, 1,000 school boards. So I think that's something we should look at some point.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. And the answer is no, we don't have enough staffing. We'll probably never have enough staffing, but things are getting better. We've got some additional attorneys, for instance, over the last year. We have a higher number of people. Before, if you do the basic math, say 3 years ago, there appeared to be about 1,500 cases that we had, maybe 10 attorneys. That's 150 cases per attorney, effectively. Now we're closer to 70. We have a much lower case number due to our combined efforts as a commission and enforcement division to reduce case numbers, but we also have a few more staff members as well to handle cases. And so things are getting a lot better, but 70 cases is still probably too many for an attorney to effectively handle, quickly. So we'll continue to strive to, if we don't get more staff, we'll continue to strive doing the things that we've been doing to reduce case numbers, and I believe that we will be effective in doing so.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. And, I mentioned this in terms of SOS, so I'll mention it here. I think the commission under Chair Matich's leadership and at the insistence of Commissioner Baker as well, did an excellent job identifying an issue related to enforcement, right? Then being innovative in how they responded to it, right? They identified that problem. They pursued changes to streamlines, which increased efficiency. They also used new technology in terms of the PREP program, which has allowed us to close more cases where there's minor violations more quickly and focus on the most serious violations. And this isn't something that's going to be resolved overnight, but I'm, very happy with the approach that we've taken in terms of identifying a problem, being innovative of how we want to solve it, and then having the commission executive director audit our progress as we attempt to meet that goal that we set for ourselves. So I just want to lay that out for the public so that they can get, like Commissioner Wilson laid out, some background on where we were and where we are now. In terms of data, I think whatever data that we can share, with the public, under, relevant laws, CPRA, et cetera, I think it's good for the public to have that, because while we may feel comfortable saying we're doing the best job we possibly can, we want to make sure there's not even the appearance out there that we're not doing all we can do to enforce the law. And I think being transparent about that, which I believe we are, assists in eliminating that appearance.
I agree. Thank you.
Excellent. Any public comment? Yes, we have public comment. Go ahead. Mr. Pencil?
Hey, good afternoon. I've
Good
been with
afternoon.
you with 3 hours now, so. Anyway, I did want to, I was the complainant on the Llewellyn and Moody case 20-/373. I noticed several things on that while I was examining it. That's at count 1, line 1, adds up to 17,500. But the for the total reportable activity, I only count $2,500 in contributions that are listed there. The other, and this took over 4 years to settle, so I've listened to your explanation of this was a streamlined settlement. Somehow 4 years doesn't seem like streamlined to me, but I understand you're understaffed and everything. I noticed that the respondent did not file the major donor campaign statement till, after 4 years. It seems like to me, like if he was trying to cooperate with the investigation, he said, "Oh, I made a mistake on that. Let's get that filed right away." It took him 4 years to file the major donor campaign statement, and you only fined him $200. So I would ask you to add, raise that to the maximum. I believe that it's an aggravating circumstance that this took 4 years. And while I feel vindicated in the work that I did to prepare the evidence, I am disappointed that you minimize the impact on this corporate contributor to a school bond issue. So I'm going to leave it at that with you tonight. And when it comes to the other item about using public resources, I see that done frequently with the school bonds, where the superintendent of schools and the finance director, they'll have big old powwows with the community, and it is a road show to pass the bond. And they do it in the school classrooms, they do it in the school auditoriums, they have the paid personnel do it. I think if you had the trustees do it who are not employees, if they want to pass a school bond, if they authorize a school bond, then let the trustees themselves bring it out. But don't use highly compensated school employees, because they have a certain air of authority that parents and primarily parents, we have an earthquake deal going on down here. They want to pass $187 million to do earthquake safety with. And this is after they already spent $134 million. So anyway, that's my comment. And we don't like seeing public resources spent to promote bond issues here. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your comment. I agree, and the commission agrees. We don't like the misuse of public funds for campaign purposes either, and it's something that we take seriously and that we prosecuted. Just on last month's agenda, we approved a stipulation for a penalty of $22,000 for violations related to a misuse. So thank you again for your comment. Do we have any other public comment? No? Well, then I will excuse Mr. Lindsay, and we will move on to the Audits Division report with Division Chief Shaw. Good afternoon, Chief
Good
Shaw.
afternoon. My report for this month is just submitted, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
I don't have any questions personally. Any questions from commissioners? No? Any public comment? Hearing and seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Why don't we move on to our next one? That's Legal Division with our General Counsel, Dave Bainbridge.
Good afternoon. Just in addition to what's in my report, I wanted to follow up on a presentation we had last month regarding the Political Reform Education Program. I wanted to provide some specifics in light of the general presentation we got last time, just to point out from our report. Our prep program had 21 learners complete the SEI training, which if you look at the enforcement numbers, that's 15% roughly of the cases closed by enforcement last month. So you can look at that as almost 15% workload reduction on the enforcement division as a result of the efforts of our prep program. So I just wanted to put in perspective how valuable the work is that they're doing. They create these trainings, but in addition to that, they spend a lot of time getting people through the trainings. One, they have to get them to get compliant. So if they haven't filed, they have to get their filings done. 2, they have to get them enrolled, and then 3, they have to get them through the program. Most people complete the program. We don't have that many dropouts. So it's not just creating these great programs, it's also ushering people through the program and making sure that this program that they put all this time into is getting used by the public, helping to reduce enforcement's load, getting the educational materials out there. So wanted to give them some credit and just follow up on what we provided. Last month, again, we've got a new campaign, both local and statewide training that has launched. We currently have 4 people enrolled, no graduates of that program yet, but hopefully in the next month. They're going to take a brief break until the election because our prep people also do our pre-election effort, which is when we get referrals from filing officers that people who are on the ballot have not filed. They go to work getting these people to file, getting them compliant. Last time around, I want to say we were like 96% successful in getting those who hadn't filed yet to file before the election so that those people did not have to go to the enforcement process. We got their filing done already. And then after pre-election, they're going to go back to work on some additional programs. So those are upcoming into this year, early next year, additional training programs that PrEP will be administering, which should further reduce the caseload for enforcement. So mostly just wanted to highlight that and give all the people that work in PrEP the credit they deserve. Other than that, my report is as submitted. Take any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Bainbridge. Any questions from commissioners? Any public comment? Hearing and seeing none, let's move on to Administration Technology Division Chief, Dr. Wang.
Good afternoon. My report submitted as it is. I'm happy to answer all the questions you have.
I don't have any questions from commissioners. Public comment? Thank you, Dr. Wang.
Thank you.
And then last, we have Executive Director update from our Executive Director, Galena West.
I have nothing to add this month.
Me neither.
Happily.
Any other questions from commissioners? Okay, excellent. Public comment on any item on that report group? Okay, it doesn't sound like we have any. We don't have to take any action here. So why don't we move on to item number 15, and that's going to be commissioner comments and proposed future agenda items. Is it necessary for Commissioner Baker to restate what she requested on this item, or are we good moving forward? Okay, excellent. Is there anything you'd want to add, Commissioner Baker?
There's a video if you've got to go back and see it, but thank you. Grateful.
Excellent. Okay, any public comment? Okay, hearing and seeing none, I'm going to move to adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Linker?
Commissioner Baker?
Aye.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Chair Silver?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Be able to take the 2 o'clock train.
Straight to the beers.